Chapter 541. Don't you already have a winged snow lion? Han Shangyue finally replied to her with a long sentence. The snow lion had always been by Yunxi's side. It obviously understood human language and immediately rubbed its head against Yunxi's hand. Yunxi sighed faintly and raised her hand to stroke the snow lion's fur. Yes, this snow lion was also given to me by Mr. I like it very much, but Little White is a terrestrial beast and I lack an aquatic beast. Mister, when you are free, can you catch a Qilin for me as a mount? Before Han Shangyue could say anything, Kirin had already jumped up. Qilins are mythical beasts. They won't be anyone's pet. Do you think Qilins are water buffaloes? That you can catch one casually? Her words were too insulting to the Qilin family. Yunxi was stunned. But aren't you that girl's pet? Kirin said angrily, I'm not a pet. We're friends. She won't treat me as a pet. Then I also want a Qilin that I can establish a blood contract with. I can also treat it as a friend. Yunxi didn't give up and looked at Han Shangyue. Sir, don't you think so? Han Shangyue turned to look at her. Is this your condition for helping me find someone? Yunxi was stunned. Of course not. Sir, Yunxi is just... If this is your condition for helping me find someone, I can agree to it. After 100 years, I will give you a Qilin beast. But our friendship ends here. Han Shanyue's voice was cold and indifferent. Yunxi's expression changed and she hurriedly said, Sir, you're thinking too much. Yunxi isn't using this as a bargaining chip. Sir and Yunxi are close friends, so it's natural for me to help you find someone. Yunxi just thought that Kirin was fun and said it casually. Sir, please don't take offense. Han Shanyue glanced at her. This is your only chance to get a Qilin beast. You really don't want it? No, I don't want it. Our friendship isn't something a Qilin beast can compare to. Sir, just take it as a joke. Yunxi didn't dare to say anything about Kirin again. She lowered her head as a hint of sadness flashed in her eyes. Yunxi, after this matter is over, I can give you another rare beast as a reward for your hard work. Yunxi sighed and said seriously, Mister, I've always treated you as my best friend. Even if you asked me to climb a mountain of swords or plunge into a sea of flames, I wouldn't even frown, let alone find someone for you. What does Sir think of Yunxi? Her eyes dimmed. Could it be that Sir has never treated Yunxi as a friend? If Sir continues to say such things, Yunxi will really be heartbroken. Han Shanyue nodded slightly and said, You don't have to worry too much. I originally wanted to make it up to you. Since you don't want it, then forget it. The group followed behind the soul-searching bird. The two humans and two beasts naturally traveled at an unprecedented speed. A distance of 100 miles was only the time it took to brew a cup of tea for them. Signs of human habitation finally appeared in front of them. It was a small city. Although it was not big, it was very prosperous. It was already early in the morning. Although the sun had only risen halfway, most of the people in the small city had already woken up, gone to work, and opened the market. From time to time, people would walk by in twos and threes on the narrow streets. There were also early cars that sped by on the streets. Small merchants and peddlers were hawking their wares along the streets. It was a scene of prosperity and prosperity. Chapter 542. This city wasn't big and the people were simple and honest. Because it was located in a remote area, there weren't many officials and nobles who came here, so there weren't many opportunities to see outsiders. Han Shanyue and Yunxi were outstanding in both appearance and dress, so when they walked side by side on the street, many people stopped to look at them. The man was like a jade tree in the wind, and the woman was like a flower in a courtyard. They were already a very eye-catching combination, and with the majestic mythological beasts following them, they were even more eye-catching. The number of people who turned to look at them was 100%. Kirin's ears were sharp, so she heard a few words of praise from the people on the street. Phrases such as a match made in heaven, a perfect pair, and so on were more common. Kirin looked at the two people walking side by side in front of her and couldn't help but feel upset. He was her master's husband. How could he be a match made in heaven with another woman? If her master saw this, she would be furious. Han Shanyue was used to doing things his own way, so he didn't care about how others looked at him. In any case, no one could see his face. As for the gossip, he just treated it as a breeze and pretended not to hear it. Kirin was about to rush between them and separate the two people who were an eyesore. However, they did not expect that from the other end of the long street, an incomparably ostentatious carriage would rush towards them at full speed. Yunxi also heard the discussions around her, and her heart beat wildly. She looked at Han Shanyue, who was walking beside her, and her mind was slightly intoxicated. In this moment of distraction, she didn't notice the carriage rushing in front of her. Be careful. Her sleeve was pulled by someone, and she narrowly avoided the carriage. When the carriage passed by, it brought a strong gust of wind that lifted her long hair. She was shocked and cried out softly as she threw herself into the arms of the person next to her. The person next to her stiffened slightly and pulled her back a little. Then he pushed her away. Yunshi. Han Shangyue frowned slightly. This was the first time he had seen Yunshi act so carelessly. Although the carriage was fast, with Yunshi's skills, she should have been able to dodge it easily. She shouldn't have stood there foolishly like other weak women, waiting to be hit. Yunshi's pretty face turned slightly pale. She brushed her hair and smiled bitterly. I can't stand the smell of those coarse rouge and powder. Every time I smell it, I feel dizzy. The same goes for the soul-searching bird. As if to prove her words, the soul-searching bird flapping its wings in front of her seemed to have drunk too much. It flew in a figure 8 in the air and plummeted down. Yunshi raised her sleeve and caught the bird in her hand. Just now, when the carriage passed by, there was a lot of chatter and the smell of cosmetics was really strong. At that time, Han Shangyue subconsciously held his breath. The carriage had already passed by, but the smell of cosmetics was still lingering in the air, giving people a headache. How is it? Han Shangyue frowned as his gaze landed on the soul-seeking bird that was shaking its legs and pretending to be dead. Let it rest for a while. It's best to purify the surrounding air. This bird is more sensitive to the smell of cosmetics. Yunshi fanned the soul-searching bird with her little hand. In order to get the bird to get up early to work, Han Shangyue waved his sleeve gently. A whirlwind instantly appeared on the street. It spun around the entire street and gradually dissipated in the distance. After the whirlwind passed, the smell of cosmetics was indeed gone. It was as fresh as if it had just rained. Chapter 543. Yunshi naturally knew that this was all thanks to Han Shangyue, so she smiled sweetly. Thank you, mister. Han Shangyue nodded slightly. Can it look for someone now? It should be able to. Yunshi released the bird again. The bird swayed for a bit before finally moving forward again. This kind of bird followed the aura of the person it was looking for. In other words, it had to go to every place that Ning Xuema had gone to. When the soul-searching bird stopped in front of a building and started chirping non-stop, it refused to fly forward no matter what. Yunshi was stunned. She looked at the small building in front of her, which was covered in colorful gauze and hung with countless red lanterns. She smiled bitterly. The soul-searching bird said that she went inside. Han Shangyue raised his head and looked at the small building. The corners of his mouth twitched slightly. It was obviously a brothel. The women in the brothel were usually open at night, so it was very cold and cheerless in the early morning. There weren't any gorgeously dressed ladies upstairs. There was only a servant downstairs who was sitting at the door and dozing off. Yunshi frowned slightly. What a strong smell of mortal powder. Mister, the soul-searching bird won't enter this place. Before she could finish her sentence, a breeze blew past her. Han Shangyue had disappeared without a trace. He had obviously gone into the brothel to look for someone. How could Kirin remain calm when it heard that its owner was inside? Even if it was a brothel, it would break into a brothel. It leaped up and flew toward the small building as well. Yunshi stood there, her face pale. Diesel was such a clean freak, yet he had entered such a filthy place for that woman. What was that woman's position in his heart? Concubine? In this world, a concubine was something that could be casually discarded. If the men here were happy, they could casually give away their concubines. Why would they care? They wouldn't change their habits that they had maintained for thousands of years for a concubine. What kind of person was that woman? How could she make Diesel treat her like this? Yunshi clenched her fists tightly. Suddenly, she steeled her heart and floated into the air, heading towards the small building. It was easy to imagine what kind of scenery there would be in the brothel in the morning. Han Shanyue's search was very fast. Wherever he went, he woke up many pairs of lovebirds, causing a commotion. When Yunshi finally caught up with him, he had just startled a pair of wild lovebirds that were having sex early in the morning. This pair of lovebirds was enjoying themselves when Han Shanyue suddenly barged in. The man was so scared that he almost couldn't get up. He jumped up from the bed and roared, "Which bastard is it?" Before he could finish cursing, his vision went black and he fell on the bed with a plop. He was on top of the woman, who was still in a daze. The woman immediately screamed. Before they could say anything, a large blanket came down on them, covering their naked bodies from head to toe. When Yunshi went in, she didn't even get a clear look at the two white shadows before her eyes were covered by a brocade handkerchief. "Go outside and wait, Yunshi." Han Shanyue's voice rang out not far from her. Yunqi only felt a strong force pushing her away. By the time she reacted, she was already outside the door. She lifted her hand and took off the brocade handkerchief. When she looked at it, she couldn't help but take a whiff. This was Dee's brocade handkerchief. It was filled with his refreshing scent. Chapter 544. Deezwa was quite considerate towards her. Yunqi's face was filled with joy. He had been afraid of seeing those dirty scenes, so he had covered her eyes with a brocade handkerchief. Her heart was beating wildly as she carefully put away the brocade handkerchief. Before Yunqi could finish her thoughts, Kirin had also come out. Han Shanyue wasn't so polite to it. "Get out of here." Kirin had obviously been thrown out. It staggered in the corridor, but it quickly steadied itself. It was still unconvinced. "Why can you see it but I can't? Isn't it just a fight between demons? It's not like I haven't seen it before." It had asked its master about this question, and its master had told it that naked men and women rolling around together was called a fight between demons. Yunqi was speechless. Her face and ears were red. She finally understood what the two white things were that she didn't have time to see clearly just now. She was too embarrassed to stay there any longer, so she turned and flew down the small building to wait outside. After the commotion, the other people in the small building woke up with a start. It was a mess. Some people were shouting, some were yelling, and some were shouting to capture the assassin. There were many hired thugs and tortoise slaves in the brothel. They all rushed up, wanting to capture the person who had dared to barge in. Yunqi was waiting downstairs from afar. She had heard the commotion upstairs, but she wasn't worried about Han Shanyue. It was undoubtedly a fool's dream for the people here to capture him. They would be lucky if they didn't get slapped to death. A moment later, the chaotic brothel suddenly quieted down. The shouting people seemed to have been suppressed by someone's aura. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Yunqi also held her breath. Had he found the person he was looking for? That girl had been brought to this place. Her chastity had probably been lost. If that girl had lost her chastity, how could she still be worthy of Deezwa? Actually, even if she hadn't lost her chastity, she still wouldn't be worthy. Now that she had lost her chastity, she was even less worthy. She even felt that being Deezwa's maid was dirty. Just as she was thinking about this, Han Shanyue's figure appeared upstairs. He lowered his sleeves and said, "Yunqi, let the soul-searching bird come up." Could it be that he didn't find it? Yunqi's heart was in a mess. She didn't know if she was hoping to find him or not. She didn't dare delay, so her figure flashed and she floated up. Her clothes fluttered as she landed upstairs. Han Shanyue must have used a spell to clear the air in this building. The unique smell of cosmetics in the brothel had already disappeared without a trace. The soul-searching bird circled around the building for a while before flying straight into one of the rooms. Han Shanyue's expression changed slightly as he followed him in. This room was obviously a courtesan's boudoir. The decorations inside were gorgeous and gaudy. The most conspicuous thing was a large carved bed in the room. The bedding on the bed was messy. It was obvious that someone had slept here not long ago. The soul-seeking bird carefully hopped onto the big bed and chirped non-stop. Yunqi paused and looked at Han Shanyue's unfriendly expression. "It said that she slept on this bed, master?" Kirin pounced on the bed and sniffed with all its might. However, it couldn't smell anything. It looked up at Han Shanyue and asked, "Master, why can't I smell her?" Shuilan cleaned up the traces of this place. Han Shanyue's voice was cold. "That bastard. He actually brought Shuima here. He even let her sleep on such a dirty bed." Chapter 545. That bastard. He had actually brought Shuima here. He had even let her sleep on such a dirty bed. Han Shanyue turned around and asked the trembling brothel keeper, "Where did the girl who slept here go last night?" His aura was too strong and his voice was too cold. The brothel keeper was so scared that her eyes were wide open and she couldn't speak. Yunqi had no choice but to soften her voice and help her ask. She had a gentle personality, and she finally managed to calm the brothel keeper down. However, although the brothel keeper's mind was normal, she was obviously confused. "This is Huan Chui's room. She has been sleeping here all this time?" She turned around and called for Huan Chui. A young girl dressed in green walked out from the group of women and answered in a trembling voice, "This is indeed my room. I was in this room all last night." She paused for a moment, then continued, "I even received a guest. Ning Shuima had been lying here, and this woman had been receiving a guest? She had been doing such dirty things beside her?" Han Shanyue slowly clenched his fingers and waved his sleeve. The woman named Huan Chui screamed and fell down the stairs. Fortunately, the building wasn't very high, so she wasn't seriously injured from the fall. She was only temporarily crippled, so she scrambled to another room and didn't dare to come out again. Kirin jumped up. That's not right. Han Shanhua looked at it. What's not right? Kirin said, that woman didn't fight in this room just now. There's no such smell here. There was actually a special smell of adrenaline when a man and a woman made love. Kirin smelled it a few more times, so it had experience. Han Shanhua was speechless. He instantly understood. The woman named Huan Shui didn't dare to lie at this time. She had probably been bewitched and received a guest in another room. After all, the rooms here were all similar. Shuilan. Shuilan seemed to have thought of everything. He was as cunning as an old fox. He had made Shuema sleep here for half the night. Where had he gone after that? He looked at Yunshi. To be exact, he was looking at the bird in her palm. Let it continue searching. Upon hearing this, the bird flew up and circled around the building. This time it didn't choose a direction to fly in. Instead, it landed and chirped at Yunshi. Yunshi frowned and said, Sir, the soul-searching bird said that it can't sense anything now. Can't sense it? How could he not sense it? Was Ning Shuema still in this building? It was impossible that he couldn't find it. The most likely reason for this was that the person had smeared Ning Shuema's body with a scent that the soul-searching bird hated, so that it could no longer search for her. The smell of disgust. That car. That carriage with the thick smell of cosmetics. He turned his head and immediately asked the brothel keeper, Are there any girls here who are sent out? How many of you left just now? The brothel keeper was at a loss. We don't go out in the morning and no girls go out. After hearing what she said, the horse carriage became even more suspicious. Could it be that Ning Shuema was in that carriage? Had he just brushed past her? Han Shanhua turned around and wanted to leave. The brothel keeper muttered to herself. Suddenly, she seemed to remember something and slapped her head. I remember now. I have a younger sister who came home this morning. She asked me to lend her a few top girls. They just left. Han Shanhua paused. That carriage belonged to the brothel keeper? Then there was nothing suspicious. Chapter 546. Han Shanhua paused for a moment before flying down the stairs. Yunshi and Kirin hurriedly followed, and the two of them disappeared in the blink of an eye. The brothel keeper was dumbfounded. This was like seeing a ghost in broad daylight. She had actually seen two top-notch men in one night. At two? Who was the other one? The brothel keeper vaguely felt that she had seen a handsome guy, but she couldn't remember who he was. A courtesan walked over and asked her in surprise, Mother, when did you have a younger sister? How did I remember that Mother was an orphan? I wanted to ask Mother this morning, but I didn't dare to ask. That woman even took away a few of our ladies. The brothel keeper was speechless. Her head buzzed and she seemed to have finally reacted. Yes, she didn't have a younger sister. Her family was all dead and she was the only one left. Then who was the woman she had affectionately sent away early in the morning? Wait a minute. That woman had taken away 5 or 6 of her ladies? The brothel keeper felt as if she had been struck by lightning. She jumped up and said, Hurry up and check for me. Which ladies were taken away? She was usually so stingy that she would calculate and spend even 1 tael of silver. Now that so many ladies had been taken away, she felt as if she was about to die. After a moment of chaos, someone came back and reported, Mother, it was Peony, Jasmine, and 6 others. All of them were her top ladies. The brothel keeper broke down. Hurry up and chase after them. The slaves didn't move. Mother, you swore that you would give those ladies to your so-called younger sister. If you go back on your word and chase after them, you will be struck by lightning from the heavens. The brothel keeper was speechless. When Ning Shuema really woke up, she was in a carriage. Then she was a little stunned. There were 6 seductively dressed women around Ning Shuema. The smell of their cosmetics rushed into her nose, causing her to sneeze loudly as soon as she opened her eyes. You're awake. Mother, you're awake. Oh, Mother, you're awake. Mother, are you tired from lying down? Let me massage your legs for you. Those women were frighteningly passionate and attentive. Mother. Ning Shuema turned over and tried to sit up. Where was she now? Was this a dream? Or did she transmigrate in her sleep again? As soon as she moved, the 6 beauties held her down one after another. Mother, your body is still very weak. It's better for you to rest. That's right, Mom. You don't look well. Peony's heart aches just looking at her. The 6 beauties took turns kissing each other. Ning Shuema only felt her head buzzing and her head swelling up by a size. She didn't have much strength in her body, so she couldn't move after being pressed down by these 6 women. This scene was too strange. It was almost the same as when she had just transmigrated to Ning Xuema's mansion and was locked in an iron cage. "Bring me a mirror," she said. Even she herself was shocked by the sound she made. Her voice had also changed. The originally delicate and crisp lowly voice had become old and hoarse. She was simply like an old woman in her 60s or 70s. The women couldn't help but look at each other when they saw her distorted expression. The women might forget to bring other things when they went out, but mirrors were indispensable. Immediately, someone took out a smooth bronze mirror and handed it to her. Chapter 547. Ning Xuemo raised her hand to take the mirror. She looked into the mirror and felt as if she had been hit by a stick. Even her breathing almost stopped. What appeared in the mirror was an old lady with wrinkles on her face. Her hair was white and she looked like a nouveau riche with a few gold hairpins. Her small eyes were slightly squinted. Her mouth was already shriveled, but her lips were painted red. Oh my God! Who was the old witch in the mirror? Was it her? Ning Xuema's gaze fell on her hand that was holding the mirror. Her hand that used to be delicate had become like the bark of an old pine tree. There were also spots of age spots on the back of her hand. Thud! The mirror fell from her hand. She had always thought of herself as a calm empress. No matter what strange things happened to her, she would be able to stay calm and find the best solution. This was also the reason why she had always been proud of herself. But now she could no longer stay calm. Her head was buzzing. Countless images flashed before her eyes. Shui Lan had cast a voodoo spell on her. Not long after she ran out, she was violently pulled back and crashed into Shui Lan's arms. Then she felt pain and numbness all over her body. In her daze, she heard Shui Lan talking to her. Then she completely fainted. When she woke up, she had turned into this old witch. What kind of mother was she? Was someone forcing her to age? Or did she die as Ning Xuema in her previous life and transmigrated into this old pimp's body? No matter which one it was enough for her to break down. When she transmigrated into a 12 or 13-year-old girl, God did not treat her too badly. After all, she was a beautiful girl. Even if she was a good-for-nothing, she could accept it and work hard with that identity. But now she had turned into an old lady. How could Ning Xuema, who always cared about her appearance, accept this? She tried her best to calm herself down. Then she seemed to have thought of something. She raised her arm and rolled up her sleeves, revealing a large part of her arm. She wore a few gold bracelets on her wrist. When she raised her arm, they made a series of clanging sounds. The skin on her arm that was hidden in her sleeves was also loose. It was no different from an old lady's arm. She was still unwilling to give up and decided to touch herself. But no matter where he touched, the skin on her body was loose. Every time he touched it, there would be a handful of wrinkles. Ning Xuema was about to cry. Heavens, let another bolt of divine lightning strike her. She did not want to transmigrate into an old lady. Don't be a brothel keeper. This was challenging her bottom line. When the women saw her grief-stricken appearance, they all tried to comfort her. It was nothing more than that her mother's body would recover and there was no need to worry. It would have been better if they hadn't comforted her. The more they comforted her, the more miserable Ning Xuema felt. She was already dizzy, and now that these women were quarreling, her head hurt even more. Shut up, all of you. After all, she was used to being the boss, so she acted quickly. Although her voice was hoarse, it was very imposing, faintly overflowing with killing intent. The women shuddered. Everybody felt the hair on their backs stood up. They were indescribably scared. Sure enough, they all shut their mouths and stared at Ning Xuema anxiously. Old lady, why do you have to be so angry? Now that we have so many girls, our days will get better and better. A voice came from the corner. It was also old and hoarse, but it was a man's voice. Old lady? Why did this name sound so strange? So scary? Chapter 548. Ning Xuema looked in the direction of the voice and found that there was an old man sitting in the corner of the carriage. He had the same wrinkled skin and white hair. He was also dressed like a nouveau riche. His face even looked a little wretched. He looked like a pimp in the movies. At this moment, his pair of muddy eyes were looking at her helplessly. Needless to say, this man was the husband of this old body of hers. Ning Xuema couldn't bear the blow and closed her eyes. She really wanted to die at this moment. She raised her hand and pulled out a hairpin from her head and directly stabbed it into her heart. Since she could transmigrate after she died, she wanted to transmigrate again. Even if she was beaten to death, she wouldn't be a wrinkled old woman. Amidst the women's cries of alarm, her wrist was tightly gripped by someone. Old woman, we're about to have a good life. Why do you want to die? That old man's movements were actually very fast. He actually managed to grab her wrist in the nick of time. The hand on her wrist was slightly warm. There were also age spots and old pine bark. However, when he grabbed her wrist, it didn't feel rough. Moreover, the strength was very precise. It didn't hurt her and she couldn't break free. Okay, old woman, I know you feel bad because your legs are useless. Don't worry, I will always take care of you and won't let you suffer any grievances. The pimp patted her hand as if he was coaxing a child. His actions made the other girls envious as well. In their line of work, their lives were like floating duckweed. Although there were many men around them, how many of them could be entrusted with their lives? Most of the women in the brothel had a miserable fate in the end. Not to mention marrying a high official, it was already a blessing if they could marry an ordinary man who cared about them. Now, the old woman in front of her was ugly and paralyzed. This old man actually treated her so well. She really met the right person. This body was actually a paralyzed person? Ning Xuema felt like she was hit by a stick again. She stared at the old man. No one knew what she was thinking. The old man sighed and raised his hand to stroke her hair. Old woman, don't think too much. Do you want to drink some water to moisten your throat? He was probably afraid that she would try to kill herself again, so he simply removed the sharp hairpins on her head. Then he carried her in his arms and let her drink the honey water that he had just made. It was probably due to the smell of the girl's cosmetics in the carriage that Ning Xuema could smell the same scent on the old man's body. When she was helped up and laid in his arms, goosebumps rose all over her body. She subconsciously pushed the bowl away. I won't drink it. It had been 3 to 4 minutes since she woke up, and her mind, which had been struck by lightning, finally began to calm down. He vaguely sensed that something was not right here. She could faintly feel that her carriage was moving very fast. Although she was covered with thick bedding, she still felt a little bumpy. The bumpy ride made her bones hurt. She sensed that there was no psychokinesis in her body. Even the inner force that she was so proud of had disappeared without a trace. She could not feel her legs. She wanted to move her legs, but the nerves in her body did not direct her in that direction. Sure enough, she was paralyzed. She threw a tantrum and did not give the old man a good face. The old man was not angry. He just smiled and rubbed her hair to comfort her. Chapter 549. He bent down and whispered in her ear, "Old woman, your hair is messy. Let me comb it for you." His warm breath by her ear made the hair on the back of Ning Xuema's neck stand up. She raised her hand and tried to push him away. "Get out of my way." The old man held her hand again. "Old woman, your temper is getting worse and worse. It's not good for your health." He tried his best to persuade her. It seemed that he was thinking about her. Ning Xuema felt like she was going to explode under the envious gazes of the other women. She took a deep breath and then another. "Open the window. It's suffocating." The smell of cosmetics in the carriage was so strong that her brain almost stopped working. The old man sighed. "Old woman, you have typhoid fever. It's not suitable for you to be exposed to the cold wind. You can't open the window." Just as he said that, the carriage suddenly jolted. The half-closed window opened a little and the fresh wind blew in. Ning Xuema was slightly refreshed. Suddenly, a light voice came from outside the carriage. "Be careful." This voice was so familiar. Ning Xuema's body suddenly stiffened and she subconsciously looked out of the window. Through the half-closed window, she saw Han Shangyue jumping to the side with a woman in his arms. The carriage moved very quickly, and this scene flashed before her eyes. She didn't even have time to see the face of the woman in his arms. She only vaguely felt that the woman was very beautiful. She even saw the majestic snow-white lion with 2 pairs of wings beside the woman. Then she heard him call out Yunshi. Then she heard the gentle voice of the woman. Yunshi can't stand the smell of coarse cosmetics. Every time she smells it, she feels dizzy. So does the soul-searching bird. She subconsciously looked back and saw Han Shangyue standing beside the woman. He seemed to be looking at the bird in her hand and was even fanning the bird with his sleeve. At that moment, the sunlight shone on the golden boy and jade girl, as if inlaid with a circle of faint silver light. It was warm and peaceful. Inside the carriage, the girls chattered and laughed. Ning Xuema could no longer hear the conversation between Han Shangyue and the girl. She suddenly didn't want to listen anymore. Why was he here? Who was the woman beside him? What was their relationship? Most importantly, she saw an old acquaintance. Did this mean that she was still in this era? What year is it now? Ning Xuema suddenly asked a girl beside her. The girl was startled and replied, "It's the autumn equinox of Lucien's 38th year." After answering, she asked in astonishment, "Mama, you even forgot the year?" Ning Xuema's heart seems to have a flash of lightning. It's still the same era, and this day is only one day away from when she fell into Shuilan's hands and was plotted against by him. "Old woman, what's wrong?" The old man hugged her tightly. Ning Xuema stared at him coldly. "Who are you?" The old man's eyes flashed with surprise. "Old woman, what's wrong?" "I'm your husband." "Then what's your name?" "What's my name?" "Where is our customs clearance document?" Ning Xuema asked several questions in one breath. The old man sighed. "You're confused because you're sick. You even forgot your name. I'm called Shui Fenghua. As for you, you're called Wei Chunhua. Here, this is our customs clearance document." Chapter 550. Two customs clearance documents were placed next to Ning Xuema's hand. Ning Xuema clenched her teeth and took the documents. She glanced at them. The names on the documents were exactly the same as what the old man had said. Wei Chunhua. Unexpectedly, she had the same name as Wei Xiaobao's mother. Ning Xuema stared at the old man. After staring for a moment, her eyes revealed a hint of doubt. "So it's like this?" She lowered her eyelids and sighed. "I actually can't remember anything." The old man smiled and hugged her. "Chunhua, don't worry. Even if you forget everything, it doesn't matter. It's fine as long as I remember everything. I will always be by your side." His deep affection made Ning Xuema feel nauseous. Ning Xuema forced a smile. She looked at the peach blossoms and lioli around her. "Who are these lively little girls?" "They were given to you by your older sister. Our hopes for the rest of our lives are all on them. After we go back, we will open a lovely spring courtyard. With these beautiful girls, our customers will definitely come rolling in." The old man outlined a beautiful blueprint for her future life. Ning Xuema sighed. At this time, she seemed to have finally accepted her fate. These girls are indeed lively. Each and every one of them are like spring onions. She closed her eyes again. After resting for a moment, she opened her eyes again. "What's wrong with my legs? How come I can't even feel them now?" The old man said, "You probably caught a cold. Since the day before yesterday you suddenly couldn't move." That's right. Mama, at that time Master carried you to our courtyard. I really didn't expect that you were our Wei Mama's younger sister." A girl named Peony at the side spoke quickly. She giggled as she talked about the situation at that time. Ning Xuema seemed to be curious. "Wei Mama? Which courtyard did you originally belong to?" "We are the girls from your biological sister Wei Qiuhua's courtyard. That courtyard is called Jianghu. It is quite famous in this small town." Peony opened her chatterbox. "Actually, our Mama Wei has always declared to the outside world that she is an orphan, so when Master came to visit while carrying you, it really gave us a fright. What's more, I didn't expect that Mama Wei would give us to you without saying anything. You should know that our Mama is a famous miser." She seemed to realize that she had said something wrong, so she pursed her lips and stopped talking. Ning Xuema was at a loss again. "So I have an older sister. My head is buzzing right now and I can't remember anything. I don't even remember entering your courtyard." "Mother, you were unconscious at the time, so of course you don't remember," Peony explained. "Master carried you here and has been waiting on you in the room since. When we left this morning, it was also old Master who carried you into the carriage. Old Master is so considerate to Mother, it really makes people envious." Ning Xuemo raised her head and rubbed her eyebrows. "I see." She glanced at the old man who had been hugging her and said with concern, "Old man, so you did so many things while I was unconscious. Are you tired? It's fine if you put me down. Go over there and rest, okay?" That old man didn't seem to think that she would accept her fate so quickly. He carefully looked at her eyebrows and eyes. "Chunhua, are you all right?" Ning Xuema slightly shook her head. "I have to live according to the person I was reincarnated as. Since I'm now Wei Chunhua, I naturally have to live well." "Reincarnated? Chunhua, do you think you've reincarnated? If you reincarnated, shouldn't you be a child?" Chapter 551. Ning Xuema closed her eyes and said, "Sometimes a person who has escaped death cannot be reincarnated as a child. Instead, they will possess the body of a person who has just died." The old man's eyes flashed. "Are you talking about reincarnating in someone else's body?" Ning Xuema sighed. "You can say that. Do you think you reincarnated in someone else's body?" The old man held her hand. Ning Xuema accepted her fate and closed her eyes. "I don't know. I always feel that I was still a little girl just a moment ago, but when I woke up, I became an old woman. It really feels like an impermanent dream." The old man smiled. No wonder she could calm down so quickly. It turned out that she thought so, He raised his hand and rubbed Ning Xuema's hair. All right, don't think so much. You are Wei Chunhua. Look at the nonsense you are saying, you are scaring these children. Ning Xuema's hair was a little numb from his rubbing. She raised her hand and patted him. You are already so old, don't be so mushy. I'm not a little girl. She looked around. The girls were indeed a little frightened by their ghostly conversation. They quietly scattered and sat away, not daring to surround the two of them. Chunhua, you will always be a little girl in my heart. The old man said affectionately. His eyes, which were almost squeezed out by his wrinkles, seemed to be flashing with light. Ning Xuema closed her eyes. Yes, I know. You go and rest first. I also want to be alone. The old man patted her hand. All right, then you can sleep for a while. I will stay by your side. Sure enough, he sat cross-legged beside her and closed his eyes to rest. The girls looked at each other. These two people would be their support in the future, so naturally they could not offend them. The girls in this line of work were the best at observing people's expressions. They also quieted down and did not dare to say anything. Ning Xuemo rested for a while. She seemed to be a little bored, so she opened her eyes and chatted with the girls. She asked them about their life in the garden, their hobbies, their specialties, and so on. Those women naturally answered all of her questions, and the carriage was once again filled with laughter and laughter. From their conversation, Ning Xuema knew that these girls were all top girls who were proficient in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. Their music skills were especially good. Ning Xuema was very pleased. You are all talented women. Those high officials and nobles will definitely like you. Finally, there is hope for the rest of my life. She glanced at the old man beside her and sighed again. It must have been hard on him while I was unconscious. Let him have a good rest. Peony helped this old woman up and sit down. My bones are hurting from lying down like this. That Peony naturally came over to lend an arm to help her up. Ning Xuema sat leaning against the car window looking out. At this moment, the carriage had already left the city and was rushing through a wilderness. The road was not wide and there were occasional potholes. On both sides of the road were large tracts of farmland. It was already autumn, and the crops in the farmland were tall, like a continuous array of green gauze curtains. The air outside is really good. Ning Xuema sighed. She simply opened the window and used her hand to lean against the window to admire the scenery outside. She could not exert any strength in the lower half of her body. Sitting like this was somewhat strenuous, so she could only rely on her arms to support herself. She seemed to have exerted a little more strength, and the golden bracelet on her wrist knocked against the window. Not only did it abrade her wrist, but it also accidentally fell off her wrist and rolled out of the window. Chapter 552. My bracelet. Ning Xuema cried out in distress. Stop the carriage, stop the carriage. Just as the coachman outside was about to stop the carriage, the old man in the carriage opened his eyes. If it's lost, it's lost. We still have to hurry on. I'll buy you a new one later. He instructed the coachman to continue moving. Ning Xuema was angry. Old man, you don't know how to live well. This golden bracelet is worth a lot of money. What's the trouble of picking it up? Stop the carriage, stop the carriage. The old man couldn't persuade her, so he ordered the carriage to stop the carriage and asked the girl to pick it up. Ning Xuema's face tensed up. Old man, I remember that the bracelet was a token of our love. I don't want someone else to pick it up. The old man was stunned and frowned. It's just a bracelet. It doesn't matter who picks it up. Their legs are more nimble. Ning Xuema glared at him. You said that you would treat me well for the rest of my life. You don't understand the hearts of women at all. She was like an 18 or 19-year-old girl. The girls in the carriage were shocked by her and had goosebumps. They thought in their hearts, she's really an old witch. She's so old yet she's still acting like a spoiled child. However, they all spoke up for her, saying that it was better for the lover to pick up the token of love. The old man was in a hurry and didn't want to be delayed by such a small matter. He looked at Ning Xuema and couldn't help but sigh. Okay, I'll go down and pick it up for you. Sure enough, he jumped off the carriage shakily and walked towards the bracelet. The carriage had already moved forward for a while and the bracelet was dozens of meters away from the carriage. When he was about to reach the bracelet, he suddenly heard a scream behind him. He subconsciously turned around and saw that the carriage had turned around for some reason. It meant that the carriage was going back. Ning Xuema, who had been staying in the carriage, jumped out of the carriage. She didn't jump off the carriage but slapped the coachman off the carriage. Then, a golden light flashed in her palm and she stabbed the butt of the horse pulling the carriage. The horse pulling the carriage was in pain and screamed. Was shocked. Then he spread his hooves and pulled the carriage towards him. The old man was startled and his body subconsciously dodged to the side of the road. The carriage swept past him like a gust of wind, and madly rushed back the way it came. Damn it! He had been tricked by that girl. A sharp light flashed in the old man's eyes, but he stood still. He had planted a heart-linking venomous insect on her body. Once she ran 2 miles away, she would automatically fly back to him. At that time he would teach her a lesson. The girls in the carriage panicked and screamed. Then Ning Xuema's stern shout made them completely shut up. That's the red-clothed zither demon who specializes in killing women. If you don't want to die, shut up. All the girls were stunned. The news about the red-clothed zither demon had spread like wildfire recently, so they had naturally heard about it. Ning Xuema didn't allow them to be in a daze. She stretched out her hand and said, "Quick, prick your fingers and drip your blood on my palm. I have a way to get you out of here." At this time she had a kind of dignity that made people believe in her. Those girls looked at each other. In the end, they were still afraid of the red-clothed zither demon. Although they were skeptical, they still pricked their fingers with the golden hairpin and dripped their blood on Ning Xuema's broken palm. Their blood dripped on the wound, but it didn't flow out. Instead, it directly seeped into her wound. Chapter 553. Ning Xuema's arm was in severe pain. Beads of sweat seeped out of her forehead, but the corner of her mouth faintly revealed a smile. She could feel that something was cruising along the veins in her arm, approaching the wound on her palm. The frightened horse ran very fast, and in the blink of an eye, it had already traveled more than 2 miles. That old man was naturally Shui Yilan. He was originally waiting for Ning Xuema to fly back on her own. However, he did not expect that when the carriage was about to become a small black dot, Ning Xuema still had no intention of flying back. Damn it. It seemed like this girl really knew how to use the heart-linking venom. She even knew how to use the blood of a prostitute to make the heart-linking venom temporarily lose its effect. This girl clearly knew his ability. She could not escape from his grasp with her own strength, so what was the purpose of her running for her life? Furthermore, she had turned back and was running towards the direction of the small town. Han Shanyue. She must be planning to go back and ask for help from Han Shanyue. It turned out that the moment she saw Han Shanyue, she already had the idea of running away. Once she met up with Han Shanyue, it would be as difficult as ascending to heaven to catch her. What a cunning little girl. She was so sure that Han Shanyue would save her? Shui Yilan was naturally unwilling to let the cooked duck fly away. He no longer cared about pretending to be an old man and quickly chased after her. After all, he was still injured. Although he had recovered part of his strength through meditation, he was still weak and his speed was not as fast as before. Even so, his running speed was still faster than the carriage. In just a moment, the distance between the two sides had closed. The girls who were hiding in the carriage saw him running towards them and were all scared pale. This old man was indeed not an ordinary old man. How could an ordinary old man run so fast? Shui Yilan's voice came from behind. "Little girl, you better stop the carriage as soon as possible. Otherwise, if I catch you, I'll skin you alive." Ning Xuema clenched her teeth and leaned against the shaft of the carriage. In her hand was the golden hairpin she had stolen from Peony's hair. She acted as if she didn't hear his threat. Not only did she not stop the carriage, she even stabbed the horse's butt. The horse was simply furious. It was already running so fast, but its butt was still stabbed. Did she still have any humanity? It spread its hooves even more, causing the carriage to jump like crazy, and its ponytail also swung wildly. Ning Xuema was close to the horse's butt, so she was inevitably hit by the horse's tail. Her cheeks burned with pain, but she clenched her teeth and endured it. This was her only chance to escape. If she missed this chance, she did not know what would happen to her. "Han Shanyue, I hope you are still here. I hope you are still in the town." The horse's tail, the horse's tail, the horse's tail, the horse. Shui Yilan threatened Ning Xuema with a few words, but it did not work. Instead, it made this girl crazily jump the horse's butt. He finally knew that threatening her was useless, so he immediately changed his target. "The girls in the carriage, listen up. Quickly make her stop the carriage. Otherwise, even if I don't do anything to her, I will peel off your skin and break your bones, torturing you to death." The 6 girls in the carriage had never experienced this kind of situation before. They were already dizzy from the running carriage, so when they heard this threat, their faces became even paler. Chapter 554. Seeing him come closer and closer, fear surged in their hearts like boiling water. They knew that this man was telling the truth. They looked at Ning Xuema, who was hugging the shaft of the carriage tightly, and then looked back at Shui Yilan. Finally, someone couldn't help but ask Ning Xuema to stop. Can you stop the carriage? We can't outrun him. Shut up. Not only will the zither-playing woman die in his hands, but he will also destroy her soul. If you stop now, you'll only be waiting for death. Ning Xuema turned back and shouted. Both sides seemed to have a point. The women looked at each other in fear, not knowing what to do. Don't listen to her. If you ask her to stop now, I swear to God that I won't make things difficult for you. Shui Yilan's voice was heard again. I'll count to 10. If you can't make her stop by then, you'll be buried with her. These words were enough. These women were originally prostitutes who had never seen the world, so they were naturally afraid of death. Shui Yilan's threat was very effective on them. Hearing him counting from behind, one of them couldn't hold it in anymore. She suddenly jumped out and tried to snatch the whip from Ning Xuema's hand. Although Ning Xuema didn't have much strength, she was still a special agent. Whether it was her skills or reaction speed, she was different from ordinary people. The woman who jumped out was just a prostitute who didn't even have the strength to truss a chicken. How could she be as agile as Ning Xuema? Ning Xuema took advantage of the situation and rolled away. Then she pulled the reins, causing the horse to make a slight turn. The huge inertia caused the woman's body to fly out. She screamed and rolled off the carriage. The woman fell on the side of the road and was dizzy. In her dizziness, she realized that Shui Yilan was chasing after her. She subconsciously shouted, I tried my best. Very good. Shui Yilan answered her with 2 words. Almost without looking back, he flicked a flying needle and stabbed it directly into the woman's neck. The woman let out a hoarse cry and her body went limp. His body rapidly shriveled, and in just a moment, there was only a puddle of water left. The other women on the carriage looked behind them with fear and trepidation. The carriage was moving too fast and they didn't see the woman who fell down turn into nothingness. Instead, they saw her body rapidly shriveling. Devil. The person behind him was indeed a demon. All the women were so shocked that their faces turned pale, and some of them even wet their pants. They squeezed tightly together, desperately holding on to the railing of the carriage. With such a crazy speed they could not even steady themselves inside, let alone rush out to fight with Ning Xuema for control of the carriage. From afar, he could already see the walls of the small town, and Shui Yilan was only 200 to 300 meters away from the carriage. With his speed, Ning Xuema's carriage wouldn't be able to enter the city before he caught up with it. Someone in the car cried out, Stop the car, stop the car. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Ning Xuema turned a deaf ear. Things had already come to this point, and she could only try her best to move forward. Han Shangyue. How good would it be if you could leave the city at this time? Would you save me? Would you save me? At this most dangerous time, the only person she could think of to save her life was him. 8, 9. Shui Yilan was still counting. His counting sound was like a death knell. Chapter 555. These counting sounds were like the urging of death. The other women in the carriage could no longer hold themselves back. They didn't want to die. 3 women looked at each other and almost at the same time, their bodies suddenly jumped out of the carriage. One of them tried to pull Ning Xuema's legs while the other 2 tried to pull her arms to get the reins back. They were trying their best. Ning Xuema didn't have much strength and the acupuncture points on her legs were sealed. She was like a paralyzed person. It was difficult for her to deal with these 3 women. She didn't want to kill them. She even wanted to save their lives. If she had let Shui Yilan take her away, she might not have died, but these women wouldn't have lived long. With Shui Yilan's methods, they would most likely be sacrificed to the zither. Even if they died, their souls would be incomplete. She was trying to save them by risking her life to escape. However, these women didn't know the whole story. Ning Xuema didn't have time to explain it to them. These women thought that she was selfish and only wanted to escape. She didn't care about their lives. At this critical moment, they wanted to stop her to please Shui Yilan. The 3 women were trying their best. Ning Xuema couldn't get rid of them. Seeing that the reins were about to be taken away by them, she made up her mind and waved the golden hairpin in her hand. Although she didn't have much strength, she was able to accurately identify the acupuncture points. One of the women who was about to take her whip was hit in the waist acupuncture point. The woman's body went soft and she lost all her strength. She was slapped off the carriage by Ning Xuema. She was merciful and used a lot of strength. The woman flew out of the carriage and fell on the side of the road instead of falling under the wheels of the carriage. After dealing with one, the other one was easy to deal with. She used the same method to get her off the carriage. The two women rolled on the ground and their faces were covered in dirt. Before they could sit up, Shui Yilan arrived. He only said one sentence, "Useless things." These were the last words the two women heard in the mortal world. Then their bodies collapsed and turned into puddles of smelly water. Of the 6 women in the carriage, only 3 were left. The woman who was still holding onto Ning Xuema's leg was so scared that her whole body went soft. She didn't dare to hold onto Ning Xuema's body anymore. She rolled and crawled back into the carriage and hugged the other 2 women, trembling. Shui Yilan was getting closer and closer. The 3 women looked through the car window and could almost see the wrinkles on his face. Before he caught up, they had already keenly felt the strong killing intent on his body, which made them feel cold all over. He had already counted to 10. Once he caught up to them, none of them would be able to survive. The desire to survive gave birth to great courage. One of the women suddenly picked up a bag beside her and threw it out of the window. The cloth bundle fell apart, and the floor was littered with clothes and miscellaneous items. There were even bottles and jars that were rolling around. There were rouge and powder. Shui Yilan was in a hurry to catch up. These things were rolling around under his feet. He had to avoid them, so his speed was naturally a bit slower. You two quickly throw things down. The more scattered, the better. Peony stood at the window and shouted. The other 2 women were indeed looking for things to throw down. When these women went out, they naturally brought along a lot of luggage. Those cloth bundles were all placed in a corner. The 2 women didn't care about anything else and casually threw down those large and small bundles. Chapter 556. The 2 women didn't care about anything else. They carried all the bags over and gave them to Peony to throw down continuously. This method was indeed not bad. It slightly slowed down Shui Yilan's footsteps. In addition, with the bags being thrown out, the carriage became lighter and lighter. The horse was able to pull it with less effort, and its speed also increased. The distance between the 2 finally increased a little. From the moment Ning Xuema seized the carriage and ran until now, only a short 10 minutes had passed. However, it was a 10 minutes of life and death struggle. The Grim Reaper's scythe was hanging above their heads. Everyone's nerves were so tense that they almost broke. Finally, all the items in the carriage were thrown out. There was nothing left to throw. Shui Yilan quickly caught up again. At this moment, their carriage was less than 2 li away from the city gate. However, this 2 li distance was like a natural moat that could not be crossed. There seemed to be a white robe fluttering in front of the city gate. Was it him? Was it him? Ning Xuema made up her mind. She didn't care about anything else and opened her mouth to shout. Suddenly, she heard a cry of alarm behind her. A black shadow flashed, and a wisp of wind directly attacked an acupuncture point on her lower back. Her body went numb and the cry was stuck in her throat. She couldn't shout anymore. Then the galloping horse let out a long neigh. A person stood up, and the carriage suddenly swayed, almost flipping over. Ning Xuema's mute acupoint was sealed, so she couldn't make a sound. In any case, her upper body was still free. She took advantage of the time when the carriage was about to flip over and the person holding her was swaying. She suddenly stabbed out with the golden hairpin in her hand. Shui Yilan finally caught up with the carriage at the last moment. He sealed Ning Xuema's acupoint, held her in his arms, and then went to control the horse. The series of movements were like moving clouds and flowing water. However, he had been chasing them for a long time. At this moment, the carriage suddenly swayed and he who was holding Ning Xuema also swayed. At this time, Ning Xuema's desperate attack with the hairpin came stabbing over without any warning. Her stabbing position was extremely tricky, and her speed was fast enough to catch Shui Yilan off guard. She had actually stabbed him in the ribs. Because he was running, his blood qi was circulating very quickly. He let out a muffled groan and fresh blood gushed out. Ning Xuema, who was in his arms, also groaned. It seemed that the effect of the heart-linking voodoo was about to be restored. Because of the heart-linking goo, the pain she suffered was far greater than Shui Yilan. But in such a desperate situation she couldn't care less. Taking advantage of the moment when Shui Yilan was trembling from the pain, she suddenly struggled and broke free from Shui Yilan's grasp. She directly fell off the carriage and rolled into the dust. She almost fell under the wheels of the carriage. In the midst of the chaos, she desperately rolled away, and the carriage brushed past her body. Ning Xuema couldn't help but roll a few times on the ground. She was dizzy from all the rolling. When she finally stopped, what appeared before her eyes was a pair of incomparably exquisite embroidered shoes. Looking up from the embroidered shoes, she saw a dress as white as gauze. Sweeping past the other party's slender waist, She saw a face that was devastatingly beautiful. This was Yunxi. She had finally met them. Where was Han Shangyue? Ning Xuema was covered in dust, but she couldn't speak. She turned her head, trying to find Han Shanyue's figure. But she was disappointed. She didn't see Han Shanyue's figure. Seeing that Shui Lan was about to jump off, Ning Xuema couldn't care about anything else. She reluctantly stretched out her hand and tugged at the corner of the woman's dress. This woman looked like a fairy. She should be very skilled in martial arts. Perhaps she could subdue Shui Lan and save them. At this point she could only resign herself to fate. You want to ask him for help? Shui Lan's voice sounded with ill intentions. His lips curled into a faint smile. Do you think he'll save you? Do you remember what day it is today? It's your big day with him. You ran away from his wedding and embarrassed him in front of everyone. I'm afraid he already hates you. Not to mention that he didn't recognize you. Even if he did, he wouldn't do anything. I've heard that he has a strange fetish. He's obsessed with mental cleanliness. Whatever he throws away, no matter how magical or precious it is, he won't look back. Chapter 558. Ning Xuema ignored him. She also had a bad habit. If she liked something, she would pursue it with all her might and try to get it. But the prerequisite was that the thing was ownerless. Once she found out that it belonged to someone else, she would give up completely. She would not let the thing that she liked entangle her heart. If she wanted to do something, she would be the only one. She would rather not be the only one. This was also the reason why she ran away from Han Shanyue. Even if she had a slight liking for him, she was slightly moved. But she did not want to be his concubine. Little Xuema, are you regretting it? Shui Lan leaned close to her ear, almost biting it. Regret? Regret running away from Han Shanyue? No, she did not regret it. If she could do it all over again, she would still run away. The only thing she regretted was that she did not leave Daliang City and went to participate in some zither recital. She was too lazy to respond to Shui Lan. She just closed her eyes and did not move. Shui Lan did not want to delay any longer. Han Shanyue and the others had just left. He had to take Ning Xuema and run as far away as possible. Now that he was facing Han Shanyue, he had no chance of winning. He had already killed the coachman. Now he could only drive the carriage himself. Fortunately, the others in the carriage were under his control and would not go against him. Ning Xuema had a few acupuncture points sealed by him. She was like a mummy. She could not speak or move. She was not a threat. He bent down and walked out of the carriage. He sat on the shaft of the carriage and was about to start the carriage. And the sudden change happened in an instant. A thunderous force came toward Shui Lan. Fortunately, Shui Lan's reaction was extremely fast. When that power was about to hit his body, he abruptly flipped his body, dodging the front of that power. At least he was not blasted into the sky, but the force came too quickly and suddenly. Although he dodged it, he was still hit by the force. His body flipped off the carriage like a paper kite. He groaned and fell to the ground. His chest was hit and he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. In such a life and death situation, he did not dare to be negligent. He rolled on the ground and was about to jump up. Shui Lan, you can go die now. A cold voice rang out and a white light flashed, cutting straight towards him. The light was ferocious, as if it had the power to destroy the heavens and the earth. Its aura was so strong that even the sun in the sky seemed to lose its color. Murderous intent filled the sky. It was actually a soul-destroying killing move. Shui Lan's expression changed drastically. He rolled away with all his might, trying to avoid the white light. However, the white light followed him like a shadow and he couldn't avoid it at all. He suddenly laughed out loud. I planted a heart-linking goo on her. After saying this, he straightened his body and stopped dodging. Just as the white light touched her clothes, it abruptly stopped. Although the blade-like murderous aura had disappeared, the hurricane brought about by the killing move was still there, tearing apart the clothes on Shui Lan's body. Finally, the crimson robe was exposed, causing him to stagger. He retreated 20 to 30 steps before he could barely stand firm. He steadied himself and looked at Han Shanyue, who had returned at some point. How did you recognize me? Han Shanyue's white robe fluttered as he stood on the carriage, completely ignoring him. Chapter 559. Han Shanyue's white robe fluttered as he stood on top of the carriage. He simply ignored Dizwa and waved his sleeves, causing the carriage to split apart like a piece of paper. 4 people were revealed in the carriage. 3 young girls were trembling as they sat, and an old woman was lying motionlessly on the ground, seemingly vomiting blood. Han Shangyue swept his gaze across the faces of the four people, and his gaze immediately locked onto the old woman. He bent down slightly and picked her up. Yunshi, who had just arrived, was stunned. Dizwa, who was obsessed with cleanliness, was actually carrying a dirty old woman in his arms. There was even dirt on her body and blood stains on her face. Even if the sun had suddenly risen from the south, she wouldn't have been so surprised. She stood in place and stared blankly at him. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to ask something, but in the end she closed it again. Ning Xuema had never thought that there would be such a light at the end of the tunnel. Even when she was held in his arms, she still couldn't believe that she had really been saved. Her nose was filled with the extremely light and pleasant smell of his body, and her ears were filled with his steady heartbeat. His body temperature was slightly lower, but it made her feel inexplicably at ease. She stared at him with wide eyes and opened her mouth, but no words came out. A line of blood flowed from the corner of her mouth again. The heart-linking voodoo had not been removed. Just now, he had only temporarily suppressed a small characteristic of it, such as the ability to increase the distance between two people. However, the most basic characteristic had not changed. For example, if Shui Yilan was injured, Ning Xuema would also be injured. Han Shangyue frowned slightly, and his fingers rested on her wrist. After a moment, he lifted his sleeve and brushed her body. Ning Xuema's sealed acupoints were finally unsealed. "Don't be afraid, I'm here." He only said 4 words to her. Although it was just 4 words, Ning Xuema's heart felt as if it had been struck by a heavy blow. Her heartstrings trembled slightly, and the rims of her eyes became slightly hot. She actually had the urge to cry. The corner of her mouth also gently pulled up. "Thank you." Her voice was still hoarse. As soon as the words left her mouth, she finally remembered her current appearance. Her body slightly stiffened. Han Shanyue's arm tightened slightly as he glanced at her. "You don't have to be polite with me." At the side, Yunshi's complexion was faintly pale. A dark light seemed to flash through her eyes. Suddenly, her figure rose, and with a wave of her finger, countless small snow-white swords flew out from her sleeves and directly attacked Shui Yilan like a violent storm. "Die, demon." Her skill was extremely high. Her snow-white sword emitted an inch-long light. With the sound of the wind, she surrounded Shui Yilan in an instant. She wanted nothing more than to kill this devil Shui Yilan with her sword. Her move was too sudden. Not to mention Shui Yilan, even Han Shanyue could not react in time. If it was any other time, Shui Yilan would not be afraid of her, but he was already at the end of his rope. As soon as he saw those small swords coming, he knew something was wrong and was about to defend himself with all his might. Suddenly, a white sleeve flew out and wrapped around all the small swords, allowing Shui Yilan to escape this calamity. Yunshi's expression changed slightly. "Teacher? This person is a great demon who has done many evil deeds. If we don't get rid of him, he will become a threat in the future." Han Shanyue glanced at her. His gaze was as cold as ice, causing Yunshi to shiver. She did not dare to continue her questioning. Han Shanyue did not bother with her anymore. With a shake of his sleeve, a white light flashed, and the small swords that were wrapped around by his sleeve turned into white mist and dissipated. Although Ning Xuema's acupuncture points had been unsealed, they had been sealed for too long. Her legs were still in a semi-paralyzed state. Chapter 560. She was not used to being hugged. Once she regained her freedom, she wanted to get down. But just as she moved her body, Han Shanyue's arm tightened. "Be good, don't move." Although his tone was cold, it was as if he was coaxing a child. Ning Xuema's body slightly stiffened. A strange feeling rose in her heart, and for a moment she could not think of what to say. She also did not know why, but in his arms she felt unusually at ease and finally felt pain all over her body. First, Shui Yilan had sealed her acupuncture points, causing her blood flow to be obstructed. Then she was hit by his heart-linking insect. He was injured, she was also injured. Then she was lying on the shaft of the carriage, being pulled by the crazy horse all the way. Just now she was in a hurry to escape and did not feel anything, but now that she was relaxed, her body finally felt uncomfortable. She only felt pain all over her body, soreness everywhere, and even her face was a little hot. She could not help but frown. Han Shanyue looked down at her and spat out 2 words, "So ugly." Ning Xuema's body stiffened, once again remembering her current appearance of an old lady, or a dirty old lady. A beauty's frown is as beautiful as a painting. An old lady's frown. "Mother, it's disgusting. Don't hug me if you think I'm ugly. Why are you still hugging me in his arms?" She pushed him, wanting him to let go. But as soon as she pushed him, she found 2 black and red bird's claw marks on his white shirt. Ning Xuema looked at the two birds' claw marks, and finally felt a burning pain in her two little hands. Just now she held the golden hairpin and poked the horses, but not only did the horses but become bloody, her palms were also scratched. Behave. He growled again. Naturally he also saw her black claw marks and he frowned in disgust. A palm pressed against her back. Ning Xuema only felt her back was warm, and there was a warm air flowing around her body. Wherever it passed, the soreness in her body gradually disappeared. Even the dirt on her body was automatically removed. Han Shangyue single-handedly healed Ning Xuema, but his eyes fell on Shuilan. He coldly said, Shuilan, I'll give you two choices. First, remove the heart-linking goo and I will let you go. Secondly, if you don't remove the heart-linking goo for her, I have my own ways to restrain you and take you away. Once I remove the goo worm for her, your time of death will come. Shuilan leaned against the trunk of a big tree on the side of the road and smiled coldly. You can cure this goo? Han Shan's expression was also distant. You don't need to use any effort to solve it, and I can't be considered too troublesome. I just need to take a bit of your heart's blood, then add blood grass, sky leaf flower and sky river water. That's enough. He actually said it exactly. Shuilan narrowed his eyes. I didn't expect you to know about this. Han Shangyue was too lazy to talk nonsense with him. Which one do you choose? Shuilan smiled. He clearly had the appearance of an old man, but his smile had a kind of evil aura. He slowly opened his mouth. Actually, I have a third choice. As he spoke, he took out a sparkling blue knife from nowhere and placed it in front of his chest. I can use self-harm to force you to let her go. Han Shanyue's expression changed slightly. Before the heart-linking goo was removed, Shuilan's self-harm was equivalent to testing the knife on Ning Xuema. If he was injured, Ning Xuema would be injured twice. He was a demon, so he wouldn't die easily no matter how many injuries he suffered. Chapter 561. The knife in Shuilan's hand was clearly not a normal knife. It was cold and had a strange light, making his eyes seem like they were filled with a ghostly aura. His knife was already close to his chest, but he still had a smile on his face. Han Shanyue, if we're talking about ruthlessness, you can't compare to me. Can you bear to see her hurt? Can you bear to see her hurt? Han Shanyue's eyebrows jumped, but before he could open his mouth, Ning Xuema suddenly moved. She held the golden hairpin in her hand and pressed it against her chest. She raised her eyebrows and said, Shuilan, I won't go with you. I'd rather die if I go with you. As for the pain you speak of, pain really doesn't mean anything to me. As soon as she finished speaking, she raised the hairpin and stabbed it into her own arm. Her stab was not light, as it went into her flesh by 1 or 2 inches. Blood immediately flowed out. Ning Xuema, don't be stupid. Han Shanyue raised his hand and grabbed her wrist, preventing her from hurting herself again. Ning Xuema's face was pale from the pain, but she still smiled. I'm only doing this to tell you one thing. If you hand me over to him, I'd rather die. Her gaze fell on Shuilan and her voice was cold. Shuilan, I'm not ruthless. Pain really doesn't mean anything to me. If you don't believe me, then try hurting yourself. This time it was Shuilan's turn to be speechless. His gaze fell on her arm that was still bleeding, and his pupils shrank. He suddenly sighed. All right, you win. The blue knife in his hand disappeared and he calmly smiled at Han Shanyue. I choose the first option. But the reason I chose this is not because I'm afraid of you, but because I'm afraid of her. I'm afraid she'll kill herself. He looked at Ning Xuema and sighed. Little Xuema, I only wanted to keep you by my side. Do you hate me so much? Ning Xuema had long been immune to his affections, so she smiled back at him. Her smile was gentle, but her words were not gentle at all. I can't wait for you to die. Shuilan choked and looked at her gently. But I want you to live in this world for a long time. Ning Xuema. Was this bastard's face made of iron? It was unprecedentedly thick. Shuilan was also straightforward. Since he had chosen the first option, he didn't dawdle. He pointed at a certain part of his arm and flicked a blood-red bead towards Han Shanyue. Han Shanyue took it and looked at it. After confirming that it was indeed the antidote, he passed it to Ning Xuema. Ning Xuema didn't care about anything else and swallowed it. The heart-linking goo poison couldn't be seen from the pulse. Ning Xuema sensed her body, but she didn't feel anything. Shuilan glanced at her. Suddenly he used his palm as a knife and cut his own arm. His arm was cut open and blood gushed out. Ning Xuema didn't expect him to do this and was secretly shocked. Her body tensed up and she subconsciously waited for the pain to come, but it didn't. She didn't feel anything. The heart-linking goo poison was really broken. Ning Xuema couldn't help but look at Shui Yilan again. That guy lost such a large piece of flesh on his arm, but he was still fine. When he saw her looking at him, he even smiled at her. Little Xuema, it's not that I can't beat you, it's just that I can't bear to part with you. He didn't look at Han Shanyue and the others anymore and turned around to leave. He was in a good mood and sang as he walked. The sun rises in the east, red clothes like fire. The spring flowers are bright, the night is waning. Holding the beauty in my arms, my heart is sad. The past is hard to recall, the zither is hard to reconcile. Chapter 562. His voice was actually very pleasant to listen to. It was deep and hoarse. His voice echoed on the main road and gradually faded away. Yunshi looked at his back and clenched her fists. Sir, this demon is very powerful. I'm afraid that it will become a problem in the future. Han Shanyue was also looking at Shui Yilan's back. His eyes flickered slightly. He vaguely felt that the tune of the song was familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had heard it before. An image seemed to flash in his mind. When he tried to grasp it, it was a blur. He acted as if he hadn't heard Yunshi's words. Yunshi's eyes flashed with hidden bitterness. She looked at Ning Xuema in his arms. Ning Xuema seemed to be in a daze. Shui Yilan's song made her heart tremble as if it had been scalded. The tune of the lyrics was so familiar that it made her heart palpitate. It was as if she had heard it many years ago or even sung it. But when she thought about it carefully, she couldn't remember. It was like prenatal education music. When a child grew up and heard the music in his mother's womb, he would feel an inexplicable sense of familiarity and even a faint sense of sadness. Her hand unconsciously tugged at Han Shanyue's clothes, but the wound on her arm was healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Yunshi's eyes fell on Han Shanyue's left hand. His left hand had been pressing on Ning Xuema's back, and he hadn't forgotten to heal her for a moment. No wonder this girl's wound healed so quickly. The scene in front of Yunshi was undoubtedly glaring to her eyes. Her eyes darkened, and then she slowly smiled. She took 2 steps forward and quietly held onto Han Shanyue's arm. Sir, is this Miss Ning? What happened to her face? Although Han Shanyue and Yunshi were friends, there weren't many opportunities for them to be physically close. Usually, before Yunshi could really get close to him, he would quietly retreat. He had a serious obsession with cleanliness. He didn't want to have physical contact with anyone, not even his friends. Even Rongyue Tianlan, who wasn't very reliable, didn't dare to touch him. Normally Yunshi wouldn't dare do it. At most, she would pull on his sleeve occasionally. However, after he glanced at her, she didn't even dare to pull on his sleeve. However, after this meeting, her attitude towards him seemed to be different. She would intentionally or unintentionally get close to him. This time she even had the guts of a leopard and directly held his arm. Han Shanyue subconsciously flicked his sleeve. Yunshi's arm went numb and she couldn't help but let go. She also took 2 steps back. Her expression changed slightly. In fact, she had mustered up her courage to do this. She thought that since he was carrying Ning Xuema in his arms, he would allow others to get close to him. She didn't expect. She pursed her lips and couldn't help but look at Ning Xuema. However, she saw that her eyes were also looking at her. There seemed to be a light flickering in her eyes as if she was proud of herself, but also as if she was mocking her. Yunshi's face turned pale. She felt as though she had been slapped silently. Hatred flashed through his usually merciful heart. Her fingers clenched in her sleeves. This woman was clearly an ordinary person. What right did an ant-like race have to compete with her? She could crush her to death with just a finger. After all, she was a person who had cultivated for thousands of years. Although her heart was in turmoil, she didn't show it on the surface. In fact, she had wronged Ning Xuema. Ning Xuema's eyes had only unconsciously landed on her. In fact, she was still in a daze. Chapter 563. Ning Xuema was trying her best to figure out the origin of the song. How could she be in the mood to mock Yunshi? Shui Yilan had already walked far away, leaving only a small black dot behind. Her gaze was still fixed in that direction, somewhat absent-minded. Han Shanyue looked down and noticed her expression. His eyes darkened slightly, and he quietly turned her in another direction. Ning Xuema, do you want to maintain this appearance? Or revert to your original appearance? He asked coldly. This sentence immediately pulled Ning Xuema's thoughts back to reality. Maintain this appearance? It would be better to just kill her. She immediately hugged one of his arms. Master Han, you have a way, right? Han Shanyue's lips curled up slightly. He was secretly satisfied with her actions, but his face remained cold. I do have a way, but the price is not small. What price? Ning Xuema blinked and looked at him with a slight smile. With Master Han's abilities, you shouldn't care about any price, right? I'm very calculative and I never do things that are useless. I don't do things that lose money. Han Shanyue's voice was still cold and indifferent. Ning Xuema secretly gritted her teeth. Was this bastard trying to take advantage of her? She raised her arm and looked at it. It seemed to be wrapped in a layer of old person's real skin. She also knew simple disguise techniques. She should be able to remove these things herself, right? She didn't want to be threatened by him. She opened her mouth to speak, but a blue shadow flashed in the distance. Kirin was running over as fast as it could. Master, I can sense Master's aura, it shouted as it ran. When it suddenly saw this scene, it was stunned. Then it suddenly came over and sniffed Ning Xuema's aura. Moss. Master. Little apple. Ning Xuema reached out and touched the horn on its head. Kirin's body stiffened, and it looked as if it had been struck by lightning. Master, we haven't seen each other for a day. How did you become so old? Ning Xuema was speechless. Don't spout nonsense. Your master was disguised by that pervert Shui Yilan. I won't grow old. She was still a delicate flower, a budding age. How could she grow old overnight? But master, your voice is so old. She sounded no different from a real old lady. I was probably forced to take some medicine. I'll do some research on it later. I'll recover. Ning Xuema was full of confidence. She also knew how to make voice-changing drugs, so naturally she knew how to neutralize it as well. The little Qilin was finally relieved. Are you sure you can handle it? Han Shanyue, who had been ignored, asked. He should be able to, right? She only needed to remove the scab on her body and take some medicine to restore her voice. Ning Xuema nodded. Han Shanyue looked at her with a faint smile and said, I'll wait and see. Then he turned around and left with her in his arms. Sir, what about these girls? Yunshi asked from the side, pointing at the three girls who were still sitting in the carriage. Han Shanyue seemed to have just noticed the three girls. He glanced at them and said indifferently, Yunshi, I'll leave them to you. Then he strode away. Yunshi's expression changed slightly. These three girls were under Shui Yilan's hypnotic spell. Yunshi did have a way to neutralize it, but it would take some time. Her body suddenly swayed and leaned against the snow lion. She let out a low moan. Her voice was neither loud nor soft, so Han Shanyue, who had just walked a few feet away, could hear it. Chapter 564. Han Shanyue turned around and his gaze fell on Yunshi. Her face was slightly pale and there was cold sweat on her forehead. She seemed very weak. There weren't many people that Han Shanyue treated as friends, and Yunshi was one of them. It was rare to see her so weak, so he was naturally concerned and looked over. Seeing that she had finally attracted his attention, Yunshi pursed her lips slightly and straightened her body. She said apologetically, I'm fine. It's just that I was a little out of breath when I was cultivating yesterday. I was also a little tired last night. I'll be fine after some rest. I'll dispel the bewitching spell for them later. Her words were very considerate. Han Shanyue didn't say anything. He placed Ning Xuema on Kirin's back and let her sit sideways. He instructed her, be good and wait here. He walked back and reached out to feel Yunshi's pulse. Her pulse was indeed a little weak and messy. It was a sign that her breath had diverged. Yunshi looked at his lowered eyebrows and her heart thumped wildly. After knowing him for so long, she had very few chances to have physical contact with him. She had achieved success in her cultivation and had two great gods as her friends. There was almost no chance of her getting hurt or sick. Occasionally when she got sick or injured, Rongyue Tianlan could easily treat her. She didn't even have the chance to pretend to be weak. Perhaps the threesome was indeed a mistake. If she wanted to pursue him, she had to seize all kinds of opportunities to be alone. For example, yesterday because she was a little upset, her breath had diverged while she was cultivating. She had almost gone mad. Before she could recover, she had been caught by Han Shanyue. After running around with him for half the night, her body was indeed a little weak. His fingers rested on her wrist. It was slightly cold. Her heart was burning with passion. She lowered her eyes slightly and didn't dare to show any emotion. However, her slightly red cheeks betrayed her excitement at the moment. Calm down and get rid of all distracting thoughts, Han Shanyue said in a calm voice. Yunshi's heart skipped a beat. She knew that he was going to use his telekinesis to heal her body. It was a rare opportunity for him to heal her, so Yunshi naturally didn't want to let it go. She nodded obediently. Okay. After saying that, she was still worried. Sir, you've been running around all night. Can your body still take it? Let Yunshi recuperate on her own. Yunshi doesn't want you to use too much telekinesis. It's all right. Han Shangyue only said 2 words. He raised his hand and a futon appeared on the ground. Sit and meditate. Yunshi's heart warmed as she smiled. Her smile was like a beautiful flower blooming gently. Then Yunshi will accept your offer. Sure enough, she sat down on the praying mat. While she was adjusting her breath, she quietly glanced at Ning Xuema, who was not far away. Ning Xuema, who was sitting on Kirin's back, saw everything but she didn't care. She was chatting with Kirin in a low voice. Although they had only been separated for 1 night, Kirin felt as if they had been separated for a year. She had a lot to say. Without waiting for Ning Xuema to ask, it spilled the beans from a bamboo tube and told her everything that happened that night. Kirin loved to gossip. Moreover, Yunshi had intentionally or unintentionally talked about her relationship with Han Shangyue in front of her. It seemed like they were very, very good friends who had accompanied each other for countless years. At this time, Kirin's words were implied. Ning Xuema listened and nodded slightly. She glanced at Han Shangyue. So this person also had friends. Chapter 565. She thought that Han Shangyue was so powerful that he didn't have any friends. No wonder there was a saying that Qin Hui had 3 childhood friends. It seemed that this saying was true. She saw that Han Shangyue was about to sit on Yunshi's back and heal her. She didn't know how long this delay would take, so she might as well bring Kirin into the city first and find an inn to get rid of the old lady's skin. She was also someone who loved cleanliness. Now that there was an additional layer of old lady's skin on her body, she felt a chill run down her spine. She couldn't wait to clean herself up and take a bath. She took advantage of the fact that Han Shangyue had just sat down and had yet to circulate his energy. She rode Kirin over and said, Master Han, you go ahead. Little Apple and I will find an inn in the city to wash up. She felt that since Han Shangyue had just saved her, it was only right for her to inform him before leaving. However, just as she spoke, Han Shangyue waved his sleeves at her and said, Be good and stay here. Don't be nosy. A faint white light enveloped Ning Xuema, and her body became weak again. Ning Xuema was speechless. Wasn't this person too unreasonable? He wanted to heal his friend, so why did he have to drag her along to watch? Forget it, since he had saved her from the fire pit, she wouldn't argue with him over such trivial matters. Since he wanted her to watch, then she would just watch. It was a good opportunity to learn another skill. In this perverted continent, having one more skill would increase one's chances of success. She sat lazily on Kirin's back and her eyes fell on the 2 of them. She wanted to learn. Han Shangyue raised his head and glanced at her. He didn't know why, but his heart was faintly unhappy. However, it was rare for her to be so obedient, so he couldn't say anything wrong with her. He didn't know what was going on with him recently, but his usually calm mind was somewhat unstable. Especially when it came to matters related to her, his mood became even more unstable. You want to learn how to heal people? Ning Xuema nodded and admitted honestly, I want to learn. He had healed people on the road, so this skill shouldn't be a secret, right? You think you can learn just by sitting there? Han Shangyue raised his eyebrows. When he was treating someone, his palm would be pressed on the person's back without moving. He relied entirely on his psychokinesis to circulate in the injured person's body. He knew where he should circulate his psychokinesis first, where he should not circulate it, and where he should not circulate it. These were all very important, but they could not be understood from the outside. The onlookers could not see where his psychokinesis was flowing to at all. She was learning from so far away? Not a chance at all. In fact, Ning Xuema also somewhat understood this principle. She knew that even if she looked carefully, she might not be able to see through it. However, it was a little boring to sit here. She also had the thought that she could understand as much as she could. Hence, when she heard Han Shanyue's question, she answered honestly, whatever I can learn is good. You know, I'm very smart. Han Shanyue was speechless. She was really narcissistic. However, what she said was true. She was indeed very smart. Come here. He said directly, and with a wave of his sleeve, he released her from her restraints. What are you doing? Ning Xuema was puzzled. Wasn't he treating his friend? Did he need someone to help him with this kind of treatment? However, looking at Han Shanyue's expression, if she didn't go over, he probably wouldn't give up. Since he was her savior, she would listen to him this time. Chapter 566. When necessary, Ning Xuema was very obedient. She walked over. As she walked, she realized that there were several holes in her skirt and pants, and a cool breeze was blowing in. Needless to say, she had worn them out when she had been desperately trying to rush the carriage. She hadn't had time to check them. She felt that something was wrong, so she looked down and heaved a sigh of relief. The holes were around her knees and the bottom of her pants. Apart from slightly affecting her appearance, there was no danger of her being exposed. Furthermore, she looked like an old woman with one foot in the grave, so there was nothing to be exposed about. She walked over to Han Shangyue. "Master Han, what instructions do you have for me?" Han Shangyue conjured another praying mat. "Sit." Ning Xuema didn't know what he was up to. She looked at Yunshi and then at Han Shangyue in confusion. Yunshi was also confused. She turned to look at Han Shangyue and asked, "Sir, what is this?" Han Shangyue didn't seem to be bothered to explain, so he only said, "Sit properly and regulate your breathing." Yunshi didn't dare disobey him, so she sat up straight and tried her best to regulate her breathing. Han Shangyue sat behind her. Yunshi only felt joy and peace, but with the addition of the senile Ning Xuema, she felt somewhat uncomfortable and almost couldn't concentrate. Han Shangyue clearly sensed her unstable state of mind, so he said faintly, "3 flowers at one's prominence, 5 hearts at one's origin." As he recited a string of incantations, his palm pressed against her back. Psychokinesis slowly flowed in, forcibly helping her to calm down. Yunshi's heart warmed. She closed her eyes and abandoned all distracting thoughts. She sensed his psychokinesis and let her own psychokinesis merge with his before following him. His psychokinesis was vigorous and boundless. After the yang qi entered her body, wherever it passed, the muscles and meridians that had been slightly damaged due to qi deviation finally began to slowly recover. This time Han Shangyue was especially talkative. Every time he helped Yunshi circulate her meridians, he would calmly explain the principle and the next step to take. Ning Xuema sat beside him and listened to his explanation. She benefited greatly. This great god's treatment was different from that of an ordinary doctor. It was completely different from what she had learned in the past. However, there was also the wonder of achieving the same goal through different means. She looked at the light emitted from his palm. It was no longer the usual white light, but a faint green light. Needless to say, he was using the wood element of telekinesis. He was indeed a god. Other people only had 1 or 2 types of psychokinesis, and even if they cultivated for a lifetime they might not reach the peak. He, on the other hand, had cultivated all 5 elements. Moreover, he was very familiar with each element and could use them as he pleased. No matter how smart a genius was, it was impossible for him to reach this level. Unless he lived long enough and had an endless amount of time, he would have plenty of time to cultivate these things. This person, I'm afraid he's far older than 70 or 80, right? 1,000 years old? Long live? Tens of thousands of years old? She was slightly distracted. Suddenly, his hand tightened around her wrist. Distracted. Ning Xuema suddenly regained her senses and couldn't help but glance at Han Shangyue. This guy was treating someone's injuries. Shouldn't he be concentrating at this time? He was actually able to sense her momentary distraction. This was too abnormal. She coughed and wanted to withdraw her hand. No, you can continue. Han Shangyue glanced at her. He had no intention of letting go of her wrist. Instead, he pulled her small hand over and pressed it on Yunshi's back. You have to sense the flow of this psychokinesis yourself. You can't be distracted again. Like a strict teacher, he wanted his student to answer his questions. Yunshi seemed to have heard something and her pretty face turned pale again. She looked at one person and then another, and a bad feeling arose in her heart. Ning Xuema was defeated by Han Shangyue. This person's ability is definitely heaven-defying, but his EQ seems to be heaven-defying as well. She wanted to withdraw her hand, but she was not as strong as him. With this tug, she stumbled and almost fell into his arms. Why are you hiding? You can't answer? Han Shanyue's face darkened. Ning Xuema felt a little sad. Was Han Shangyue treating her as a concubine or a disciple? Forget it, it seemed that it would not be right if she did not answer today. Chapter 568. Forget it, it seemed like she couldn't keep quiet today. Anyway, it was his friend's heart that was hurt, not hers. If he didn't appreciate her occasional kindness, then she would say it. Of course I remember. using 30% of your strength from the back. She began to explain the pressure points he had used to guide her. Her memory was excellent, so she was able to recite them exactly. Han Shanyue's expression finally eased. Although he didn't say anything, he still looked satisfied. His expression eased, but Yunqi's pretty face turned pale. She was quite proficient in this area of medicine, so she knew that the process Ning Xuema had described couldn't be understood just by watching. It had to be done personally. He actually let this woman do it on her. He was using her as a living teaching material. This was simply a slap to her face. No matter how restrained Yunqi was and how she didn't dare to provoke Han Shanyue, she was furious. I worked so hard for you and you actually humiliated me like this. She was so angry that her lips trembled and she couldn't speak clearly. Han Shanyue slowly stood up, his voice still indifferent. Yunqi, you worked hard for me all night. Do you feel wronged? Yunqi was stunned. Yunqi didn't mean that. Do you think that I should be deeply grateful to you just because you've helped me this time? No, absolutely not. Yunqi shook her head. In the thousands of years that they had known each other, Dizwa had done many things for her. He had saved her many times, but she had done very little for him. She didn't know how many favors she owed Dizwa over the years, but she felt that it was natural for a woman to owe a man a favor. She had accepted it as a matter of course and had never thought of how to repay it. Dizwa was too powerful, so he had never asked her to repay the favor. This time, Dizwa had asked her to help him find someone. She felt that she had finally helped Dizwa once, so he should treat her better and remember her favor. Of course, this was just her subconscious thought. She hadn't actually thought about it that much. Then what are you angry about? I was just taking advantage of the situation and teaching her some medical knowledge. How is that an insult to you? Yunqi's pretty face turned green and white. She didn't know how to answer his question. After a moment she choked out, Yunqi? Yunqi just doesn't want to be a living example. Huh? Han Shanyue raised his eyebrows. When Tianlan taught you medical skills, she didn't let you practice with any patience. This? Of course there is. It was almost impossible to learn good medical skills without having patience. Does his patient feel insulted? This. Yunqi was speechless. When Rongyue Tianlan taught her medical skills, she also let her operate on the spot. Those patients were all in fear and trepidation, feeling very honored. They are just ordinary warriors. Yunqi finally struggled to say. A patient is a patient. There is no difference in status. Han Shanyue's voice was still as calm as flowing water. Yunqi, if you feel that I owe you a favor for working for me this time, I will return the favor in the future. From then on, we will never cross paths again. Yunqi immediately panicked. This was not the result she wanted. She couldn't care less and stepped forward. Sir, Yunqi definitely didn't mean that. Chapter 569. She couldn't care less as she stepped forward. Sir, I definitely didn't mean that. I've always treated you as my best friend. What's the point of owing favors between friends? If you think about it seriously, I owe you a lot. If you continue to say this, I'll be too ashamed to show my face. I said something wrong just now. I apologize to you. She gathered her sleeves and bowed to Han Shanyue. How could this be? Ning Xuema felt that her horizons had been broadened. Han Shanyue was clearly in the wrong, yet he could make him bow to him with just a few words. Although this guy's EQ was negative, he wasn't bad at all. Ning Xuema's gaze once again shifted to Yunqi's body. She saw that her eyes were brimming with tears, making her look pitiful. She was born extremely beautiful, and a man's heart of stone was best touched by a beauty's tears. Normally, when a man saw her like this, even if he was furious, he would just let it go. He would even comfort the beauty a few times. However, Han Shanyue was obviously not an ordinary man. He was like an iceberg that couldn't be warmed. Yunqi had already lowered herself to such a low level, yet all she got in return was a grunt from him before he ignored her. Instead, he picked up Ning Xuema, who was watching calmly from the sidelines. Ning Xuema wasn't worried that he would carry her. She was stunned. I can walk by myself. When Han Shanyue had grabbed her hand to treat Yunqi's injury, his telekinesis had passed through her palm and unavoidably adjusted her blood vessels. She didn't feel any discomfort now. She could even do a round of boxing with no problem, let alone walk. Just as she was about to struggle, Han Shanyue's arms tightened slightly. Be good. The wide sleeves covered the torn part of her trousers, intentionally or unintentionally. Sir, where are we going? Yunqi, who was behind him, had already sorted out her dispirited mood and was reinvigorated. Your injury has just healed. Go back and recuperate, Han Shangyue instructed without turning his head. Yunqi was stunned as she watched his back disappear into the distance. For a moment she didn't know what to do. Shamelessly following her would make her lose face. She was unwilling to give up just like that. He stood in the same spot for a moment. Then he seemed to have thought of something and let out a sigh of relief. He looked at the three women in the carriage. A moment later she undid the bewitching spell on the three women. Where are you taking me? Ning Xuema was also puzzled. He seemed to be addicted to hugging her and was still hugging her at this time. Didn't you want to get rid of the disguise yourself? Weren't they looking for an inn? Han Shangyue asked. All right, so he was carrying her to the inn. At this moment, the sun had already risen high up in the sky. Pedestrians began to appear one after another on this road. Some were riding horses, some were sitting in sedan chairs, and some were walking. When these people saw Han Shangyue and his group, they all stopped to take a look. It couldn't be helped, this combination looked too strange. An otherworldly man was hugging an old lady in tattered clothes with a face full of wrinkles. Beside them was a majestic little Qilin. Along the way Han Shangyue had received a lot of attention. He was already used to such gazes and acted as if nothing had happened. He seemed to be strolling leisurely, looking very lazy and leisurely. Ning Xuema, who was in his arms, suddenly burst out laughing. Han Shangyue looked at her strangely. What are you laughing at? He wasn't teasing her. Chapter 570. Hearing his question, Ning Xuema's eyes curved even more. She did not seem to have the intention to explain, but she could not help but laugh again. So ugly. Han Shangyue did not hold back. There are more wrinkles on your face when you laugh. Alright, this guy was a sharp-tongued tsundere. When he insulted people, it was enough to make them suffer. Ning Xuema did not mind. Anyway, the wrinkles on her face were not her original appearance. So what if it was ugly? He usually had a cold aura, but his body was actually not cold. Ning Xuema felt very comfortable being hugged by him. There was an indescribable light fragrance on his body. If one did not smell it carefully, one would not be able to tell. However, it was refreshing and calming. Ning Xuema snuggled in his arms and felt a little sleepy. She felt as if she had slept in this embrace before. Why were you laughing just now? Han Shangyue obviously did not want to let her go. I was laughing. Ning Xuema looked up at his face and said leisurely, I was thinking that if you hugged me like this, in the eyes of outsiders, they would probably think that you were hugging your mother and praise you for being a filial son. Han Shangyue was speechless. He almost threw her out. Old mother? He had a faint smile on his face and his tone was cold. Ning Xuema lifted her arms and hugged his neck, appeasing him. I'm only saying that in the eyes of outsiders who don't know the truth. It's not like I'm really your mother. You're the one who asked me, so I told you my true thoughts. You can't be so petty and get angry just because of this, right? This posture was supposed to be the posture of a blooming orchid, but Han Shangyue looked at her wrinkled face and did not feel anything good about it. He pulled her arms away from his neck and looked at her with a faint smile. Are you acting coquettishly in front of me? Ning Xuema was stunned. Before she could say anything, he continued, an old woman acting coquettishly in front of a young man. Do you know how scary your image is? Ning Xuema was speechless. She seemed to have been hit by his words and subconsciously defended herself. I am not an old woman. I'm only 13. You're not a young man. You just look a little younger, but you're actually much older than me. I'm afraid you're more than old enough to be my grandfather. Why was this girl so concerned about his age? However, with his age he was more than old enough to be her ancestor, let alone her grandfather. He was a little lost in thought, but he didn't argue with her. He just said, then you can call me grandpa from now on. He absolutely could not accept this. Ning Xuema laughed. Although you are old enough to be my grandfather, calling you grandpa makes you sound old. It doesn't fit your image. I'll just call you Guru. Ning Xuema finally thought of the most suitable title. This title couldn't be more appropriate for him. God. Han Shanyue's eyes flickered, and his tone was somewhat unpredictable. You know? He changed his words. Don't you always like to call me Great Master? Why did you change it to Guru? Did she know something? Ning Xuema didn't notice the slight change in his tone. When she heard his question, she casually said, Guru is a title for those who are super powerful, super strong, have a high status and have a high status. It's most suitable for you. So that's what Guru meant. She really had a lot of strange words. Han Shanyue's tone was faint. As you wish. Guru, how did you know that there was something wrong with the carriage? Chapter 571. Great Master, how did you know that there was something wrong with the carriage? She thought that he didn't notice it at all and just passed by it. This carriage passed by me before. There were originally 8 people in the carriage and 1 coachman outside. Now that the coachman is gone, the 8 people in the carriage have become 5. Han Shangyue said slowly. Ning Xuema stared at him with her eyes wide open. At that time the carriage had just passed by him, but he remembered so many things. He was indeed a great master. And then? Just based on this he could tell that she was in the carriage? There were several wounds on the horse's buttocks from sharp objects. If the horse was really frightened, the coachman would pull the reins hard and not use sharp objects to provoke it. Therefore, it wasn't the horse that was frightened, but someone who was driving the horse to run faster. Ning Xuema stared at him without blinking. This guy really had a strong reasoning ability. If the horse was frightened and ran wildly, the people in the carriage would be very nervous and their heartbeats would increase. Especially the normal women, their heartbeats would be even more rapid. However, 3 of the women were breathing calmly and their heartbeats were even slower than usual. This proves that the 3 of them were controlled by someone. And the only man in the carriage had a rapid heartbeat, which proved that he had just run wildly. His heartbeat was rapid and strong, and his breathing was long, which proved that he was a highly skilled martial artist. If he was in the carriage just now, the horse wouldn't have been frightened and would have been controlled by him in an instant. He wouldn't have allowed a woman to drive the carriage while lying on her stomach. This is enough to prove that he was the one who chased after the carriage. The carriage didn't lose control, but it was driven away by someone, and the person who was escaping was that man. Ning Xuema was speechless. She had nothing to say. There aren't many people who can escape from such a person, and you are one of them. If I'm not wrong, you must have thought of a way to trick him off the carriage, and then you took him by surprise and escaped with the carriage. Is that so? He said it as if he had seen it with his own eyes. Ning Xuema gave him a thumbs up. Guru, even if you don't want to be a guru, you can still be a detective. Han Shanyue's eyes flashed with a hint of a smile, then he slowly opened his mouth. This carriage was originally going out of the city. You clearly knew that with his martial arts he could easily catch up to you, but you still chose to run wildly. It should be because you saw your savior. At that time when I passed by you, although I did not notice you, you saw me, right? The person you should be asking for help should be me. Am I right? He had seen through it all. Ning Xuema sighed. Xuema has nothing to say. The Almighty had guessed correctly. Since you've already seen through this, why did you wait for a moment before suddenly attacking? She thought she was completely ignored by him. Is there a need to doubt? If I were to act rashly while he was in the carriage, he would definitely use you as a hostage. Naturally, we have to wait for him to come out and attack him when he is unprepared. The Almighty's strategy was indeed well executed. Ning Xuema was completely convinced by this point. Although you ran away from me, you still trust me in your bones, isn't that right? Han Shanyue's words suddenly came from the sky. Ning Xuema was speechless. She had forgotten about this. Because of his words, the harmonious atmosphere between the two of them became a little awkward. Ning Xuema couldn't help but ask, why me? Chapter 572. I've already answered this question before. There's no need to repeat it now, Han Shanyue said faintly. However, his answer back then was obviously perfunctory. She didn't believe that he was destined to be a loner. He had said that he only needed a concubine. Given the Almighty's abilities, he probably didn't choose a concubine just to satisfy his lust. Could it be that he was actually missing a shield? A shield to shield him from women? The more Ning Xuema thought about it, the more she felt that her deduction was reasonable. She could already see the relationship between this Almighty and Yunshi. It was a classic scene of falling flowers falling in love with the heartless brook. Yunshi liked this Almighty, but the Almighty only treated her as a friend. However, Yunshi didn't give up and finally started to pursue him. This annoyed the Almighty, but he didn't want to fall out with her. Therefore he chose a concubine by his side to make her give up. Then, whether he hugged her or deliberately used Yunshi as a living example, could it be that it was all to make Yunshi angry? That was possible. After all, this Almighty didn't usually like to get close to people. Back then she had only kissed him as a joke, but he had slapped her on the street. Later, he had suddenly changed and mysteriously appeared at the royal banquet. He had even hugged her and played the pipa, forcing her to marry him. That was probably the reason. She had offended him before, so he didn't feel guilty about using her as a shield, plus, he knew that she didn't like him. Even if he dumped her in the future, she wouldn't pester him. Plus, she was just an ordinary person. Even if she wanted to pester him, she would probably be tortured to death by him at any time. She wouldn't cause him any trouble. Ning Xuema glanced back through the gap between Han Shanyue's arms. Yunxi was still standing there in the distance. Her figure looked a little bleak. She had obviously suffered a blow. For some reason, Ning Xuema suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. She smiled and asked casually, "Almighty, you don't actually want a concubine but a shield, right?" Han Shanyue raised his eyebrows. He didn't seem to understand where her deduction came from. "You don't love me, do you?" Ning Xuema asked again. Han Shanyue paused and looked down at her. After a while he replied, "I will not love anyone." "Right?" She guessed that was it. "Then your excellency chose me to be your concubine because you wanted me to be your shield, right?" Ning Xuema finally asked the question that had been hovering in her mind. When she asked this question she couldn't help but hold her breath. Han Shanyue was taken aback for a moment, then said lightly, "Is that what you think?" "That's right. Otherwise I really can't figure out why you're forcing me to marry you. You clearly know that I don't love you." Ning Xuema blurted out the last sentence. After she finished speaking, her heart skipped a beat. Han Shanyue's footsteps paused again. His aura seemed to have cooled down. He said indifferently, "If that's the case then you've guessed correctly. I will only treat you as a shield. You must remember this." Everything seemed to make sense now. Him marrying her as a concubine had nothing to do with love. Ning Xuema seemed to heave a sigh of relief. She looked at him and said, "I can be your shield, but I have a condition." Since everything was out in the open, she would first be a villain and then a gentleman. She would state all her conditions to maximize her benefits. Chapter 573. Han Shanyue glanced at her again. "Say it." Ning Xuema looked at his expressionless face and thought for a while. She organized her words and simply stated her condition. "I can be your concubine in name and be responsible for dealing with all kinds of women for you, but you and I don't have to consummate our marriage. We don't have to sleep together. What do you think?" Han Shanyue was speechless. "Did I say that I would consummate our marriage after marrying you?" His voice was cold and indifferent. It turned out that he didn't intend to consummate their marriage. That was great. Ning Xuema let out a sigh of relief and smiled. "Great God, are you saying that you agree to my conditions?" Han Shanyue looked at her smiling face and didn't know why he felt that it was particularly irritating. "I won't consummate my marriage with a shield." He glanced at her again. "Even if you want to, I won't allow it." Ning Xuema sighed in relief again. "It's great that you can think this way." If she knew that he would think this way, she wouldn't have run away. He used her as a shield and she could become stronger under his wings. When she had a certain level of strength, she would be able to make her own way. The sea is wide and the sky is high and the birds can fly. I can beat up whoever I don't like. I can make the whole world bow down to me. Instead of being chased by all kinds of people like a rat running across the street, constantly walking on the edge of danger and almost having sex with the king of hell a few times. "Oh right, I'll be your shield concubine. Although I'm still pure, outsiders don't know. If you don't need me in the future, I'm afraid it'll be difficult for me to marry again. My future is bleak." She still wanted to marry someone else. Han Shanyue raised his eyebrows and looked at her. "So?" He seemed to be suppressing something and his voice was a little dull. "So you have to compensate me." Ning Xuema answered matter-of-factly. "What compensation do you want? Find a good husband for you in the future?" This was the first time someone bargained with him like this, and this girl was always the exception. Han Shanyue's voice was a little cold. "That won't be necessary. There's no need for you to worry about my marriage. Great God, you see, I'm the heavenly lone star that you personally conferred upon me. I'm like a rat that everyone wants to beat up. If I don't have good martial arts, I'll only be beaten up. It's very unpleasant. Why don't Great God teach me some martial arts during this period of time, or give me some elixirs that can quickly improve my skills so that I can have enough ability to protect myself? You want to be my disciple?" Han Shanyue interrupted her and went straight to the point. Ning Xuema explained, "That's not necessary. Guru, you taught me Kung Fu as a condition for me to be your shield concubine. There's no master-disciple relationship between us." "Terms of exchange?" Han Shanyue lightly repeated. "Then have you ever thought of becoming my disciple? I have imparted more martial arts to you. Not only do you have the ability to protect yourself with the reputation of my disciple, no one on this continent would dare to bully you. Ning Xuema shook her head. I won't acknowledge you as my master. Why? He had always been the one to pick his disciples, and no disciple had ever dared to despise him. This was simply... For the first time Han Shanhua had the urge to laugh. Ning Xuema covered her mouth and yawned. Master-disciple love is the most annoying thing. Han Shanhua... He didn't know what to think, but his voice was cold. I also hate it. What's the relationship between acknowledging a master and master-disciple love? Don't tell me you want to... Ning Xuema interrupted him. Great God, you're thinking too much. I don't want to develop a relationship with you. Then why are you afraid of master-disciple love? Han Shanhua's voice was obviously unhappy. Great God, have you forgotten? I'm still your concubine. If I acknowledge you as my master, wouldn't I be both your disciple and your concubine? In the eyes of outsiders, we're a perverted master-disciple love. Han Shanhua secretly took a breath. So you also have times when you care about other people's opinions? Of course, when it's time to care, I still have to care. Great God, you'll agree to my terms, right? You see, you're only teaching me a part of your martial arts. There's no need for us to be master and disciple. Once the game is over, we can happily part ways. We don't owe each other anything. Game, once they part ways, they don't owe each other anything. Han Shanhua looked at her coldly. If this is what you want, I'll agree to it. Ning Xuema's eyes lit up. The negotiation was a success. She smiled. Then I'll thank you, great God. She began to draw a blueprint for a beautiful future in her heart. She was proud of herself. Her eyebrows became lively, and her pair of old eyes shone brightly. Just as she was fantasizing non-stop, her body suddenly soared into the sky like she was riding on a cloud. When she came back to her senses, she was already sitting on the little Qilin's back. He threw her a little too hard. When Ning Xuema landed on Kirin's back, her butt hurt a little. She hissed and looked at Han Shanhua in surprise. You? Han Shanhua's voice was cold. If you want to dream, go on Kirin's back. Don't drool in my arms. Drool? Did she? Ning Xuema couldn't help but touch the corner of her mouth. Of course she didn't feel anything. Forget it. For the sake of a beautiful future, she wouldn't argue with him. She sat on Kirin's back and suddenly found a terrible problem. The crotch of her pants was torn. When she spread her legs, she could feel the cold wind. This posture was really unsightly. Ning Xuema immediately crossed her other leg over and sat diagonally on the Qilin's back. Because she now had a plan for her future, she felt happy and straightforwardly sang, "Follow my left hand. Follow my right hand in slow motion. This song gives you happiness. Have you fallen in love with me? Follow my nose, move your eyes and ears, act good and handsome. Change your style. Youth is too much. Unknown guesses. Growing pains are nothing." She forgot that she had the hoarse voice of an old woman. Her singing was like a broken gong, and she was shocked when she sang. Her howl also attracted the attention of passers-by. They didn't understand why this old woman was so happy. Ning Xuema was not someone who cared about other people's opinions. Since she wanted to sing thoroughly. As long as she was happy, she didn't care about other people's opinions. So she was still singing happily. Her two little feet swung on Kirin's back. She looked very relaxed. My bravery is charged, reaching every place with my head held high, the sun of this world, because confidence can illuminate meth center of the stage. Only with me can I shine, only with me can I shine. Compared to Ning Xuema's good mood, Han Shanhua was still like a 1,000-year-old iceberg. She couldn't tell what he was feeling, but the air around him seemed to be colder. Ning Xuema's good mood lasted until they reached the inn. But after 2 hours, her mood couldn't be good anymore. Fuck, Tencent has gone crazy and directly transmigrated my chapter. I had to change it again. My heart is stifled. Chapter 574. After she entered the inn, she closed the door and checked her body carefully. Then she immediately collapsed. It turned out that Shui Yilan, that bastard, did not only disguise her visible parts. Other than her private parts, the rest of her body was covered by that layer of old skin. In other words, even if she was unintentionally stripped naked, the exposed skin would belong to an elderly person. It would not expose her original identity. In other words, her delicate little body had been seen by that bastard while she was unconscious. It wasn't that Ning Xuema didn't know about disguise techniques, but she had never seen such a high-level disguise technique that could pass off as genuine. Not to mention other people, even she herself could not see any flaws in her disguise. She almost thought that her body was old and clumsy. Even her once proud bosom was now deflated, drooping like a ragged sack. What kind of heaven-defying disguise technique was this? Where did that bastard Shuilan learn such a perverted technique? It was simply turning something magical into something rotten. She was speechless to be able to make such a beautiful woman like her look like this. Ning Xuema was familiar with only two kinds of disguise techniques. One was to use drugs to blacken or yellow the skin, then use light and shadow effects to change the facial features. Thick eyebrows, small or big mouth, high or low cheekbones. These could all be done with ordinary disguise techniques. For example, Ning Xuema's appearance at the zither recital was this kind of disguise. This was the most basic thing that could not be changed. If it was someone who was very familiar with it, they would be able to recognize it at a glance. The other kind was to use the so-called human skin mask. This kind of disguise was more bloody. Ning Xuema had used this kind of disguise when she pretended to be Tui Dao. Although this kind of disguise could make one look like a completely different person, the facial expression was still stiff. It could only be fooled under the dim candlelight. But once it was exposed to the bright sunlight, it would immediately make people see that something was wrong. Ning Xuema thought that there were only these two kinds of disguise techniques in the world. Now she finally saw another one, and it was from herself. She looked at her loose skin and took the scalpel that she had prepared beforehand. She tried to peel off the skin on the back of her hand first. She felt that Shuilan must have put a layer of skin on her. As long as she peeled a small hole, she should be able to tear off this eyesore of skin and restore her youthful appearance. She was a doctor who knew how to perform surgeries, so she naturally had a good grasp of the strength she used to peel off the fake skin. But when she gently cut down, she looked at the surface of the broken skin and wanted to cry. There was no second skin. This extremely flabby-looking skin was her own. Could it be that the bastard didn't disguise her, but used some sorcery to age her? After experiencing the hot spring incident, Ning Xuema had a very deep understanding of this perverted world. In this perverted world, anything could happen. Only the unthinkable could happen. There was nothing that couldn't happen. She then cut a few more parts of her body. Just like before, the skin on her body was her own skin. There was no human skin at all. How could she break this kind of disguise technique? Ning Xuema looked at her wrinkled face in the crystal mirror and only felt a buzzing in her head. Was this how she looked when she was old? Ah, she was only 13 years old. Chapter 575. Ning Xuema was only 13 years old. Was it really okay to let her see her old appearance? Was it really okay? Wasn't this too much of a challenge to her mental endurance? Ning Xuema locked herself in her room and tried all kinds of methods over and over again, but to no avail. She even took the medicine to restore her voice, but her voice was still very old and broken. Even if a person like Han Shanyue were to stay in an inn, he would stay in the best and most luxurious one. Moreover, it had to be clean and spotless. Everything had to be wiped clean so even a fly would slip on it. Of course, the place he stayed in would definitely not have flies. In fact, there was not even a mosquito's wing in the entire inn. It was so clean that it was as if it had been thoroughly cleaned by water. Ning Xuema was actually very puzzled by his connections and methods. She had obviously decided to stay in the inn on the spur of the moment, but Han Shanyue had the means to let her stay in such a clean and high-class room after entering the city. Ning Xuema stayed in the room closer to the inside. The facilities in the room were almost comparable to the ancient version of the presidential suite. Everything that she needed for daily life could be easily obtained. She even took a medicinal bath. Of course, it did not help her skin recover at all. Ning Xuema was doing her best in the presidential suite. Han Shanyue sat at a table downstairs and drank tea. He did not need any staff. The tea set, teapot, and tea leaves were all brought by him. Even the few plates of desserts on the table were not from this inn. They were exquisite and small, and each piece of dessert was filled with a cultured aura. There was no one else in the inn. It was obvious that he had booked the whole place. The shopkeeper and staff were all in a safe corner, pretending to be invisible. They did not dare to make a sound. Of course, they were happy to be free. The money that Mr. Han gave them was enough to cover half a month of their inn's income. And he only booked it for a day. Tomorrow they would be able to operate as usual. Why not? Money could make the devil turn millstones. Moreover, the one who paid was this Mr. Han. The new heavenly master of Chang Kong country? Even if he did not pay, just the fact that he could stay here for a day was enough for them to show off. In the future, their inn's reputation would be even greater, and customers would come rolling in. Thus, these people treated Han Shangyue, the god of fortune, with an extraordinary amount of respect. They would do whatever he ordered them to do, and each of them carried out his orders more effectively than an imperial edict. Kirin was lying at Han Shanyue's feet, dozing off with his eyes closed. It originally wanted to follow Ning Xuema upstairs, but Han Shanyue's gaze froze it back. But it didn't want to go anywhere else. He decided to just lie there and watch Han Shanyue brew tea. The aroma of the tea was rich and mellow, with the refreshing air of the mountain spring. Just smelling it was enough to make one feel intoxicated. Kirin had never smelled such good tea before, and it lay there looking at him eagerly, expecting him to give it a cup. However, Han Shanyue obviously had no intention of giving it any tea. He poured himself a cup of tea and drank it leisurely. Kirin did not get any response from Han Shanyue, so it finally got angry. It laid its head on its paws and closed its eyes to sleep. It had been busy for most of the night last night, so it was really sleepy now. After lying there for a while, it groggily wanted to go see Lord Zhou. But before it could pull the Duke of Zhou's little hand, it was kicked in the butt. This kick was not strong, but it was just enough to make its butt hurt and wake it up. Chapter 576. Kirin suddenly opened its eyes and stared at Han Shanyue, the culprit. "What are you doing? Not giving it tea and not allowing it to sleep? This is too inhumane. Do you really think you are a cat? Sleeping like a cat?" Han Shanyue looked at it coldly. Kirin looked at its sleeping posture. It really did look like a cat. It seemed that Han Shanyue was very dissatisfied with its cat appearance and often used words to provoke it. Kirin did not want to argue with him, so it changed its position and lay on its side on the floor like a sleeping tiger. But it did not expect that just as it was about to fall asleep, it was kicked in the butt again. Under Kirin's angry eyes, Han Shanyue said lightly, "Are you the king of beasts, the Kirin? Or the tiger, the king of beasts? Don't you feel embarrassed sleeping like this?" Kirin held back for a moment. It actually wanted to bite this troublesome Master Han. But it was not his opponent. Lying on its stomach was not okay, lying on its side was not okay, so it might as well lie on its back. Isn't this how humans sleep? So Kirin simply turned its body over and slept with its limbs facing the sky. This position was not very comfortable for it. It took a long time for it to get used to it. Before it could fall asleep, Han Shanyue kicked it again. "Are you sleeping like a corpse?" The little Qilin was simply furious. How did he dislike its sleeping posture? He was obviously looking for trouble. It stared at him angrily. "What do you want? I can't do this, I can't do that, how do you want me to sleep?" Han Shanyue raised his hand and drank a mouthful of tea. "You dare to talk to me?" This sentence was obviously threatening and even had a hint of coldness. Kirin felt a chill in its heart. It seemed that it could not afford to offend this person. The scales that stood up because of anger slowly calmed down. It muttered, "Then how do you want me to sleep? You are a Kirin. Do you need me to teach you how to sleep?" Han Shanyue asked back. Kirin wanted to slap him with its claws. It never thought that sleeping was such a difficult choice. It could not sleep standing up like a crane, right? Could not sleep standing up. He was clearly looking for trouble. Kirin tilted his head and looked at him. Suddenly, a voice came from the sky. "Master, are you in a bad mood?" That was why he was tormenting Kirin in such a perverted manner. Han Shanyue tightened his grip on the cup and looked at it with a faint smile. "Am I in a bad mood?" Kirin had a bad feeling when he saw his expression. He immediately took a step back and said, "Hee, maybe I was wrong. Don't take it to heart." Han Shanyue swirled the teacup in his hand and leisurely blew away the foam in the tea. "I am indeed not in a good mood. Do you want to please me? How could a pervert like you be so easy to please?" Kirin cursed in its heart. It cautiously took a step back. It's not easy to please a master. Little Apple doesn't have that ability. No, you have the ability. Han Shanyue's expression became even more gentle. He could even be said to be amiable. "Why don't you roll a few times to make up for it, Kirin?" It's not a dog. It had to roll to please its master. Not to mention that he was not its master. Just as it was trying to find another excuse, a faint noise came from outside. It seemed that there was a dispute outside. Kirin finally seized the opportunity and jumped up. Chapter 577. Someone is causing trouble outside, I'll go out and take a look. Kirin ran out like a wisp of smoke. Han Shanyue did not move. He did not need to go out and take a look to know what was going on outside. It was nothing more than another rich and overbearing person who wanted to book the entire inn. There was indeed another rich and overbearing person outside, and this rich and overbearing person was a young lady. When Kirin arrived at the entrance of the inn, the first thing she saw was a super flashy carriage. The entire carriage was carved out of an extremely expensive red sandalwood. There were countless runes engraved on it, and each rune was decorated with a luminous pearl. These luminous pearls were full and lustrous. Even though it was under the sun, they still shone with a flowing luster. These luminous pearls formed a pattern of stars surrounding the moon. It was as bright as the sea of stars. The window of the carriage was hung with the legendary sharkman's silk that only sharkmen could weave. It was clearly white, but when the wind blew, it looked like flowing sea waves with unpredictable colors. In front of the carriage there were 16 bodyguards riding on horses. They were as handsome as jade trees and their horses were like dragons. Every one of them was smart and valiant. It was obvious that these people were well trained. The 16 of them fanned out, with a distance of 1 meter between them, not 1 meter more, not 1 meter less. They were even more orderly than soldiers during a military parade. They did not speak nor did they move. They were as silent as a group of statues. However, the aura he exuded was enough to intimidate anyone who saw him. Smart people wouldn't dare to provoke him. The surrounding onlookers automatically retreated dozens of meters away, not daring to get close. The one who stood at the door and negotiated with the waiter was a maid dressed in green. Although she was dressed as a maid, her clothes and aura were incomparable to ordinary maids. Every move of hers was clean and crisp. The waiter understood that this group of people was not to be trifled with. But the people in the inn were even more difficult to deal with. The waiter knew this better than anyone else. So he looked as if he had just swallowed 8 bitter gourds. He earnestly explained to the maid, "I'm sorry, miss. The inn has been booked. Please go to another inn." The maid in green smiled coldly. "How much did he use?" "We will pay double." The waiter shook his head. "Miss, I'm sorry. Even if you pay 3 times the price, it won't work. Please go to another house. You really don't know what's good for you? You can't make the decision on this matter. Call your shopkeeper out." The servant girl in green clothes didn't want to be long-winded with the waiter. The waiter also felt that he really couldn't handle it. One of them quickly ran inside and asked the shopkeeper to come out. The shopkeeper's expression changed when he saw the carriage. He paused, flicked his sleeves and bowed to the carriage. "I didn't know it was the 8th Commandery Princess. Please forgive me for not welcoming you." He bowed deeply and only one word came out from the carriage, "You're excused." The voice was crisp and carried a natural nobility. The servant girl in green immediately said, "Innkeeper, since you know that it's our princess, then can we take over your inn? We can give you 3 times the price." The shopkeeper's heart was incomparably bitter. In this small city, there weren't many high officials and nobles, and there weren't many who came to stay in the inn. His guest room was usually half full. Now the god of fortune had finally arrived. Chapter 578. Now that the inn finally had the god of wealth, there were 2 of them. Neither of them could tolerate the other. It would have been better if they had split the trip into 2 days. Now he had to give up on one of them. If it was not Han Shangyue who was in the inn, he might be tempted by the one who offered him 3 times the price. But it was Han Shangyue. Even if the one who came later offered him 10 times or 100 times the price, he would not agree, let alone 3 times the price. So he rejected the offer in a euphemistic way. Because Han Shangyue didn't ask him to identify himself, the innkeeper didn't dare to say who was in the inn. He could only bow and beg them to go to another inn. He could help them find the next one and guarantee that everything would be fine and so on. He was polite and euphemistic, but the maid in green did not buy it. She said coldly, "Our 8th Commandery Princess wants to stay in the best inn. She doesn't want anything less than that. You ask the guest to come out. I will negotiate with him. We will pay him 10 times the price. I promise he will move." The innkeeper did not move. He just bowed to the carriage and said, Sorry. Please don't make things difficult for me." Obviously, he did not dare to go into the inn and ask the guest to come out. Although he did not mention Han Shanyue's name, his actions showed that the guest in the inn had a powerful background. He was even more powerful than the 8th Commandery Princess. The maid in green wanted to say something more, but the door of the carriage suddenly opened. Everyone saw a girl come out of the carriage. The girl looked delicate and pretty. She was wearing a black dress with flowers on it. The dress spun and spread out as she jumped down, like a flower flying in the wind. When the crowd saw the girl, they all had the same thought. So this was the famous 8th Commandery princess. They did not expect her to be so beautiful. They widened their eyes and wanted to take a closer look. Unexpectedly, the girl threw out a roll of light muslin. The light muslin landed on the ground and spread out like a carpet to the entrance of the inn. After doing all this, the girl bowed to the people in the carriage and said, "Princess, you can get off now." Everyone was speechless. Their eyes were wide open. The girl who came out was not the 8th Commandery princess, but one of her maidservants. This display of extravagance wasn't just an ordinary level of grandeur. Even Kirin, who was hiding behind the door to watch the show, widened his eyes and felt his blood boil. Haha, someone came to challenge that pervert Han Shangyue. It didn't want to miss out on the fun. It wanted to see who the 8th Commandery princess was. She was so cool. After the maid finished speaking, she lowered her body. A figure flashed in the carriage and a purple-clothed girl appeared. Purple was a light gauze purple, like smoke or fog. No one could tell what material her clothes were made of, but everyone could tell that the origin of this material was not simple. Perhaps every inch of it was made of gold. This young girl's face was also covered with a light purple veil, revealing only her eyes. The crowd couldn't see the girl's appearance clearly, but from her ink-like black hair, her extremely graceful figure, and her aura, they knew that this girl was extraordinary. The girl who got off the car first had already stunned everyone, but the girl who came out later made everyone hold their breaths. The 8th Commandery princess. This was the 8th Commandery princess Mingwan, who was born in the Bright King's mansion and was the younger sister of the current Bright King. She was famous for being the #1 genius in the power of fire. Chapter 579. Everyone's gaze was on the 8th princess, but the little Qilin's gaze was attracted by the cat in her bosom. The cat was lying lazily in the arms of the 8th Commandery princess. It was as big as a Persian cat and as fluffy as a snowball. It squinted its sapphire-like eyes and looked very lively. Perhaps the cat had sensed the little Qilin's gaze, so it looked at the little Qilin. It stared at the little Qilin for a moment and then moved away proudly. It snorted and rubbed its head against the 8th Commandery princess's chest, then continued to sleep lazily. Kirin was speechless. This cat was not afraid of him at all. One had to know that all the beasts in the world would submit to the Qilin when they saw it. Even the domestic animals that had yet to gain intelligence would be so obedient when they saw it. How dare this cat ignore him? The 8th Commandery princess jumped up and gently stepped on the maid's back. Then she landed on the ground leisurely. She walked into the shop and said, "I'm going to talk to that customer." She had a kind of aura, an aura that no one dared to disobey. Moreover, as soon as she got off the carriage, the 16 bodyguards automatically surrounded her and escorted her into the store with large strides. The shopkeeper did not dare to stop her. Even if he wanted to, he could not get close to her. He complained in his heart and said, "8th Commandery princess, please wait. You really can't disturb that person. It was time for a fight. It was time for a fight." Someone was going to challenge Guru Han. Little Qilin was in high spirits and followed behind the crowd. When it came out to watch the fight, it shrunk itself to the size of a poodle to avoid being too shocking. It had been hiding in the dark so no one noticed it. However, the cat in the arms of the 8th Commandery princess stared at it several times. In the hall, Han Shangyue was still drinking tea. When the 8th Commandery princess and the others came in, he did not seem to hear them at all. He poured and drank by himself, enjoying himself. The crowd saw him as soon as they came in, and then they all stopped in their tracks. In the hall, the aroma of tea rose in spirals. The aroma was faint, and in the rising tea mist, a white-clothed man sat faintly. They couldn't see his features clearly, and they couldn't even see his figure clearly. However, he gave off an extremely handsome and young feeling for no reason. More importantly, the aura that surrounded him was like the clouds floating in the sky. He didn't seem like someone from the mortal world. He was just sitting there doing nothing. He didn't even look in their direction, but everyone who came in was as silent as cicadas in winter. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly. There seemed to be faint music playing in the hall. How could this be the hall of an ordinary inn? It was more like a legendary immortal's cave. The 8th Commandery princess Mingwan also stopped. She looked at Han Shangyue with a complicated expression. She finally understood why the innkeeper did not agree to drive away the guests. No one in the world would dare to chase away this guest. So it is Heavenly Master Han. Mingwan did not know and has offended you. Princess Mingwan bowed. Although she was impetuous, she was not a reckless person. She knew clearly who she could offend and who she couldn't. Han Shanhua didn't look at her. He just raised his hand and took a sip of tea. He didn't seem to care about her. He was used to being indifferent. There were not many people or things in the world that could attract his attention, so he wouldn't care. Chapter 580. The 8th Commandery Princess was not annoyed. She gave the maid beside her a look. The maid was clever. She immediately took out an exquisite box and opened it. The box was covered with brocade. On the brocade there was a red Ganoderma lucidum. "Sir, this is a 1,000-year-old Ganoderma lucidum. Please accept it." The onlookers all secretly sucked in a breath of cold air. A 1,000-year-old Ganoderma lucidum. It was a precious herb in this world. It had powerful functions and was the dream of many practitioners. It was so rare that even the imperial palace might not have many of them. Moreover, this one looked like a top-quality herb. Even if one had the money, they would not be able to buy it. Now, the 8th Commandery Princess gave away such a precious Ganoderma lucidum without even blinking her eyes. She was indeed a member of the Bright King family. She was extraordinarily rich. Han Shanhua finally looked at her and said calmly, "Do you want to exchange it with me?" The 8th Commandery Princess smiled and said, "No, this is a gift for you. I apologize for my rudeness just now." Han Shanhua replied lightly. He did not intend to take the box and said, "You don't want anything from me?" Mingwan's eyes flashed and she bowed again. "I only admire you. I don't want anything from you. Of course, if you are willing, can you give me a place to stay in this inn? I promise that I only need a few rooms and I will not disturb you. If you agree to my request, I will also give you a 1,000-year-old Chinese knotweed." The others were stunned. This Infanta Mingwan had really spent a lot of money just to stay in this inn. She was indeed the daughter of a rich family. She was so capricious. Even Kirin secretly gave her a thumbs up. She was awesome. It seemed that the Bright King mansion was not inferior to the imperial family. The 8th Commandery Princess's status was also much higher than Ji Yunyao's. She spent a lot of money just to get a place in an inn in a small town. The crowd was speechless. Han Shanhua had turned around to drink his tea. He was not interested in the 1,000-year-old Ganoderma lucidum or the 1,000-year-old Chinese knotweed. He also did not want to share the limelight with others in the same inn. Just as he was about to speak, a voice suddenly came from the stairwell. "We're changing." The voice was old and hoarse. It was the voice of an old woman. Everyone raised their heads in surprise and saw an old granny over 70 years old standing on the stairs. Her hair was white and she wore a green silk dress. Her hair was combed into an old person's bun. Although her old face was full of wrinkles, one could faintly see that she was extremely beautiful when she was young. Even now, as she stood there, she was clearly no longer youthful, but she still had a kind of majesty, a majesty that no one could underestimate. Even if she was an old lady, she was still a graceful and elegant old lady. Other than the shopkeeper and the shop assistant, everyone who came in widened their eyes in disbelief. Wasn't this inn reserved by Heavenly Master Han Shan and Yuhan? Where did this old lady come from? Everyone knew that Master Han Yuhan had a serious obsession with cleanliness. When he stayed in the inn, he would always reserve the entire place and not allow any outsiders to enter. Now, in the inn that he had booked, there was such an old lady walking out so openly. Just this point alone was enough to shock everyone. Everyone looked at her as if they had seen a Tyrannosaurus Rex suddenly appear in the city. Their eyes were filled with disbelief. Chapter 581. Everyone's eyes were filled with disbelief. Even Princess Mingwan was stunned. For a moment she did not know how to react. However, what was even more unbelievable was still to come. Han Shanhua, who had always been cold and disdained to look at anyone, was now looking at the old woman. There was even a hint of a smile in his eyes. "How is it?" The one who came down the stairs was naturally Ning Xuema. She had been tormenting herself until now, but there was no result at all. She finally gave up. Hearing the movement downstairs, she changed her clothes and came out. She had to say that Han Shanhua had foresight. He had ordered people to prepare clothes for her for the elderly, and the clothes were simple and fitted, as if they were made for Ning Xuema. After she was dressed properly, she secretly gritted her teeth. It seemed that this great Master Han had a very accurate grasp of a person's size. Hearing Han Shanhua's question, she spread out her hands. "As you can see, I still look like a bear." Han Shanhua's mood seemed to have improved. His fingers leisurely twirled the teacup. "Perhaps you have other methods to try?" Ning Xuema shook her head. No. She had tried all the methods she knew. Her skin had been cut a few times and now it was still burning. Then you are prepared to stay like this? Han Shangyue smiled faintly. How could this be? She would rather die than stay like this. Ning Xuema went up and sat opposite him. She picked up the teapot on the table and poured herself a cup. She drank it all in one gulp and put the teacup down. She looked at him like a cat. You have a way, right? Han Shangyue picked up his teapot and did not answer her question. Instead he said something unrelated. Good tea needs to be tasted. You are drinking it like a cow. Him avoiding this topic proved that he had a way. Ning Xuema's eyes lit up. In order to return to her beautiful self, she immediately threw away her prideful integrity. She picked up the teapot and poured a cup for him. Of course, she didn't forget to pour a cup for herself. I've learned a lot. I'll drink it gracefully right now. She picked up the teacup and took a sip, looking very elegant. Han Shangyue glanced at her and said coldly, You did it on purpose. Why was he so troublesome? Ning Xuema gritted her teeth inwardly, but since she was the one asking for help, she couldn't raise her voice to him. He paused for a moment before picking up the teacup in front of him and attentively placing it in his hands. Then he said sincerely, In the future I'll try my best to drink my tea as smoothly as the clouds and flowing water. Alright, great God, you have a way to break that perverse spell, right? Han Shangyue seemed to be satisfied with her attentiveness. He gave her face and took a sip. But his answer kicked Ning Xuema into the abyss. There's no other way. Ning Xuema, even he couldn't do anything? Then was she going to live with this face in the future? Heavens, she might as well be struck by divine lightning. She felt uneasy and her hand trembled. Some of the tea spilled out and wet her hand. The tea ran down the back of her hand. Han Shangyue couldn't stand it. He took out a handkerchief from nowhere and threw it to her. Wipe? Ning Xuema picked up the handkerchief with a bitter face and wiped the back of her hand carelessly. She didn't wipe very carefully. After wiping, she put the handkerchief on the table. She raised her head and was about to say something when a hand reached over and grabbed her wrist. Her hand that was splashed with tea was pulled over. Chapter 582. Han Shangyue looked at Ning Xuema's hand, which was obviously stained with tea. He frowned unhappily. You can't even wipe this clean? Then he took out a handkerchief and wiped her hand carefully. He didn't even let go of the cleavage in her wrinkles. He was a clean freak, so he wiped Ning Xuema's hand until it was much cleaner than if it had been washed with soap. He even wiped the age spots on the back of her hand until they turned red. He only let go of her when he was sure that her hand was clean. Then he slowly added, I can't cure it, but it doesn't mean that I don't know who can cure it. This bastard was simply taking a breather. Ning Xuema's heart, which had sunk to the bottom of the abyss, was pulled out again. She decisively hugged one of his arms. Guru, then take me to find this person. Han Shangyue retracted his arm in disgust. Don't touch me. Her face was full of wrinkles and acting cute to him made his hair stand on end. However, his mood was inexplicably better. Ning Xuema was irritated by his disgusted expression. You don't want me to touch you because you think I'm ugly, right? If you don't take me to find him, I'll just disgust you. She rushed forward and held his hand again. She sincerely discussed with him, Guru, you are my future husband. If I keep looking like this, I'll embarrass you, right? So, you have to find a way to cure me as soon as possible. Bang! The sound of something falling to the ground was heard. Ning Xuema looked back and saw that everyone was collectively petrified. Even the 8th Commandery princess, who was smooth and slick in dealing with people, looked as if she had been struck by lightning. Her maid was so shocked that she dropped the box in her hand. The lid of the box was opened, revealing the 1,000-year-old Chinese knotweed inside. Ning Xuema finally realized that there were so many people watching. She calmly went forward and picked up the Chinese knotweed. Although the box fell to the ground, the Chinese knotweed was still intact. Not a single strand of hair was missing. The other maid was still holding the box with the 1,000-year-old blood Ganoderma lucidum. Ning Xuema took it and looked at it. She was sure that it was genuine. She immediately smiled and patted the 8th Commandery princess's shoulder. Your suggestion just now was very good. I agree on his behalf. The 8th Commandery princess finally came to her senses. She looked at Ning Xuema with a complicated expression and said, Senior? Her mind was in a state of dizziness as if she had been struck by lightning. In her mind, she was still desperately thinking, Heavens, this old lady is actually the godlike Honorable Master Han's wife. This old lady was actually Master Han's wife. It was too horrifying. It was too shocking. She definitely wouldn't believe it if someone else said that. But now she saw it with her own eyes. Moreover, this Master Han who was difficult to approach was very special to this old lady. He actually allowed her to get so close to him and even wiped her hands for her. Oh my God, oh my God. Oh my God. What was wrong with the world? Her eyes lit up as if she had seen some gossip. After Ning Xuema came to this world, she had been addressed by many different names. Little girl, stinky girl, little girl, and so on. It was the first time that someone had called her senior. It made her feel a sense of vicissitudes. She raised her hand to touch her wrinkled face and gently patted the 8th Commandery Princess's shoulder. She smiled kindly and said, "Little girl, the condition you mentioned just now is fair, so we have a deal. We accept your 2 gifts. How many rooms can you live in?" Chapter 583. However, I see that you have quite a number of people and I'm afraid that a few rooms won't be enough. I'm sorry to have to trouble the 8th princess. I have an idea that will allow the 8th princess and your subordinates to live comfortably. Would you like to hear it? Mingwan was still in a daze and asked subconsciously, "What idea?" Ning Xuema smiled kindly, "We are old and we don't want to be calculative with the younger generation. We might as well let you have the entire inn and let you live comfortably. However, as compensation you have to agree to a small condition." Mingwan asked subconsciously, "What condition? Why don't you give us your carriage as well? Mr. Han is currently lacking a means of transportation, so your carriage is barely passable. But with a small horse carriage, you can book the entire inn and let Mr. Han give up his seat for you. Isn't that a good deal? Since you don't deny it, does that mean you agree?" This? Mingwan was still in a daze and did not know what to say. You are indeed a smart and decisive girl. Then you agree. Ning Xuema turned around and waved at Han Shanyue. "Husband," she agreed. "Let's just give the inn to this little girl and find another inn. It's the same." Han Shanyue was speechless. Mingwan was speechless. 15 minutes later, Ning Xuema was sitting comfortably in the magnificent horse carriage. Mingwan's belongings had already been moved out of the carriage. However, the interior of the carriage was luxurious and comfortable. Ning Xuema leaned against a brocade couch and felt very comfortable. Han Shanyue sat opposite her, half leaning against the side of the carriage and looked very relaxed. Of course, with his extreme misophobia, although the interior of the carriage was originally clean enough, he still used the cleaning spell to erase all the auras belonging to Princess Mingwan and the others. Now the air in the carriage was as fresh as the wilderness after the rain. Just a breath was refreshing. Here, it had to be said that Princess Mingwan was very understanding and smooth in dealing with people. After she gave her priceless carriage to the Ning Xuema couple in her half-petrified state, although she regretted it so much that she wanted to bleed, she didn't show it on her face. She might as well help them all the way to the end and even gave them a stable boy with excellent driving skills. Now the carriage was moving on the wide street. The sound of the carriage was crisp and clear, tinkling as it moved forward. Kirin did not dare to transform into a cat in front of Han Shanyue. In order to stay in the carriage, it shrunk its body to the size of a small poodle. It curled up on a brocade stool and finally had a good night's sleep. With its master here, it believed that Han Shanyue would not kick it because of its improper sleeping posture. Ning Xuema was in a good mood because she was out of danger and there was hope for her appearance to recover. Last night she was carried here and there by Shuilan. Although she was tired, Shuilan was even more tired than her. After all, she was the one who was carried. Later on, Shuilan was afraid that she would play tricks again, so he simply knocked her out. She actually slept through the night. When she was driving the carriage, she was only a little nervous, but she was not tired. Also, because she had taken a good bath, she was now very energetic. Sitting in the carriage, Ning Xuema looked at the green mountains and trees on both sides of the road and felt very comfortable. "Why do you care so much about your appearance?" Han Shanyue pushed her old face away, twirling a white jade flute in his hand, his posture leisurely and languid. He looked at her again. If this girl became like this, there might be fewer peach blossoms flying around and she could concentrate on practicing. Or maybe he would not take her to find that person. He began to seriously consider this possibility. Ning Xuema was cursing in her heart. Damn it. She was only 13 years old. She did not want to become a face's face. Chapter 585. If he didn't care about his appearance, why did he look like a gigolo? Why didn't he look like an uncle? However, looking at Han Shanyue's expression, he didn't seem to be willing to bring her to find him. Ning Xuema made up her mind and threw herself on him. She hugged his waist and pushed her head up to his chin. Almighty, look, don't you think I look scary like this? It was indeed scary. Han Shanyue resisted the urge to slap her away. He pulled her hands away and said bluntly, "You will look like this sooner or later." He could already tell that her current appearance was what she would look like when she was older. People will die sooner or later. You can't just strangle a child when he is born, right? Ning Xuema tried to reason with him. The beauty of life lies in the process, not in the ending that you already know. It was like reading a novel. The reader was looking at the ups and downs of the plot and the warmth and laughter. Even tears were a kind of beauty. It was not a happy ending that everyone knew. Han Shanyue raised his eyebrows. At this moment she was sticking close to him like a dog-skin plaster, but he didn't feel particularly annoyed. He even thought it was funny when he saw her white head. If other old ladies were to stick close to him like this, he would probably have slapped them out of the Milky Way. He had never been so close to anyone in his life, let alone hugging his waist. Only this little girl was an exception. Was this also a kind of fate? Han Shanyue looked down at her. What you said seems to make some sense. Ning Xuema saw that his tone had loosened, so she immediately continued, "What you said is very reasonable. You see, I'm only 13 years old. I'm like a flower that has just bloomed and hasn't bloomed in the wind. If it withered and withered, wouldn't it be too unfair? It also goes against the natural law of life." Han Shanyue pushed her face away. "Why are you blooming? Attracting bees and butterflies?" Tiske. When did she attract bees and butterflies? She was always unlucky and despised by all kinds of people, okay. Although she did attract some young masters, it proved that her personality was too charming. Even with the title of being a loner, she could still attract suitors, although most of them were rotten suitors. Wait. He didn't want to restore her appearance because he was afraid that she would attract bees and butterflies? Was he jealous? No, he wouldn't. This Almighty probably didn't know what jealousy meant. A person like him wouldn't be jealous of anyone. It should be his possessiveness, right? After all, she had the title of his concubine. If there were too many men around her, he would feel like he had a green hat hanging above his head. She raised her hand. "Great God, I swear, during the time I'm your shield concubine, I won't take the initiative to meet with other men." Of course, if those men came to find her, it wouldn't count as her breaking the oath. In order to restore her original appearance, she was going all out. Han Shanyue's her. "Hayes my SSDSS green hat." Han Shanyue simply crossed his arms and looked at her without saying a word. "Ars satis agree or agree tistitis have tistitis have, as he's." Then Shanyue finally opened his mouth. "Did I say I wouldn't take you to see a doctor?" He looked out the window and said again, "Aren't we on the road to Carefree Island?" You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.